Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Jacobson family. Neil Jacobson was born in 1961 to Harold Jacobs, a former Marine, and Goldie, a homemaker. He had two sisters, Deborah and Robin. Although the parents were strict, they also loved their children very much. Despite the outward calm, but Neil's parents faced some challenges. His mother struggled with lifelong depression, managed with medication and therapy. On the contrary, his father is a calm person and a reliable support for the family, but sometimes he cannot avoid moments of breakdown. Neil also faced mental health issues, likely inherited from his mother, and tried to meet the high standards set by his parents. His sisters, however, seemed unaffected by psychological issues. Neighbors saw family members treating each other with respect and love. Neil's first serious problems began after he was admitted to Montclair State University. He successfully completed his initial years, but each new stage became increasingly difficult. Additionally, he took a job to support himself. He tried his best to manage the workload from both his studies and his job, while also wanting to make his parents proud. However, at times, he couldn't handle it. As a result, just before earning his bachelor's degree, he suffered a breakdown and dropped out of school. Despite facing psychological difficulties and strictness from his parents, he still received support from his father. Yet, it was always very hard for him to accept that he couldn't live up to his parent example. Neil's relationships with women were often complicated and not smooth. However, when he was 29, he met Frankie at the gym. She was 33 at the time. He worked on Long Island, while Frankie worked on Wall Street. Their shared profession as stockbrokers brought them together. They both lived in the same residential complex in Queens, New York. Initially friends, they gradually began dating. Their mutual interests and activities drew them closer. They spent many weekends together over the years. Diving, cycling, and other sports. Their relationship was genuinely happy, as noted by all their friends. On New Year's Eve in 1989, they announced their engagement, and by the end of July 1991, they were married. They decided to start their own business. Neil opened a mortgage brokerage firm in 1993, and a few years later, Frankie left her job to join him in growing the company. Their business prospered, and by 2002, they were able to purchase a luxury home. Not everything went smoothly for them. They always wanted children, but Frankie couldn't get pregnant. She was undergoing infertility treatment for a long time, and finally, a miracle happened. She became pregnant and gave birth to twins, Eric and Joshua, in 2003. The two boys are a great couple and support each other well. Joshua had speech difficulties, but they did everything to support the boy. He attended specialized therapy that their wealth allowed them to afford. During this time, Neil grew tired of the weather in New Jersey, where their mansion was located. In addition, his father Harold's health was deteriorating, and it was difficult for him to visit them because of the distance. To be closer to his father, he decided to move to Florida. He bought 4 properties in the Palm Beach area, 3 condos, and a dream home worth about $1 million. He sees apartments as a good business opportunity to earn rental income. Neil started planning to move, but Frankie was not excited about it. She enjoyed their current home because her family, friends, and business were there, and their children were still young. She did not want to leave, which caused some disagreements between them. However, they managed to work through these difficulties. Neil didn't pressure she to move immediately. Instead, he gave her time to consider it. During a vacation, they visited their dream house, which was still unfurnished, so they slept on air mattresses and gradually got used to the place. Frankie eventually grew fond of it. A few years later, she was ready to move. By July 2007, they relocated to Florida with their children. The children got involved in sports and achieved their first successes. Besides taking care of the children and managing the household, Frankie was also creative and worked on writing a children's book. However, in 2008, their family began to face serious problems. At that time, the real estate market bubble burst, causing a financial crisis that affected many other sectors. The apartments did not generate the income Neil had anticipated, investments did not pay off, previous deals failed, and new purchases were unsuccessful. Consequently, Neil found himself unable to repay the loans he had taken out. Neil, once a successful businessman with over $2 million in capital, is now facing the same amount of debt, and he is struggling to overcome this financial difficulty. During this challenging time, Neil's father passed away, adding more pressure to the family. He had to sell assets for very low prices, yet still faced a substantial debt of $1 million. The ongoing crisis left them with almost no income, and they felt lost about what to do next. They were at risk of losing everything, and this situation seriously affected Neil's health. Then, doctors detected issues with Neil's thyroid gland, although tests only showed a slight hormone imbalance. The doctor chose not to address it immediately, hoping it would improve over time. However, his condition became much worse, particularly affecting his mental health. Shortly after Christmas 2009, he felt unwell, experiencing dizziness and weakness. On January 2, 2010, Frankie took him to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed him with depression and prescribed strong antidepressants, Zoloft and Cias. After a second doctor visit, he was also prescribed the sedative Oxynax, but his condition did not improve, leading him to see a psychiatrist. During his first meeting with the new doctor, Neil reported frequent panic attacks related to the real estate market collapse. Although he had no obvious symptoms that required previously prescribed medications, he did show signs of anxiety. Instead of reducing or changing his medication, the doctor increased the dosage, which led to further deterioration of his condition and the emergence of alarming symptoms. Frankie told her sister, Neela, that Neil experienced periodic hallucinations and had trouble sleeping. He often behaved inappropriately, seemed disoriented, and felt lost. He was convinced that FBI agents were monitoring him because of his debts. He believed that he and Frankie would be imprisoned and that their children would be placed in foster care. All of his relatives knew that he wasn't being watched, but they couldn't convince him otherwise. He was truly paranoid. Neil became withdrawn, staying awake at night waiting for Frankie to wake up, and spent his days following her around, constantly talking about his fears. He couldn't handle the gaze of strangers, so he almost completely stopped going outside, fearing he was being pursued by the FBI. One notable incident that showed Neil's paranoia happened when Frankie managed to get him to go to the gym. She believed that exercise could improve his overall health, including his mental health. However, even before getting on the exercise bike, Neil's heart rate skyrocketed to 200 beats per minute due to his anxiety. This heart rate was dangerously high for his age, so they had to stop the workout to avoid risking his health. Neil's condition was deteriorating, yet he continued taking high doses of medication. About 3 weeks before the incident, he went out alone to enjoy the fresh air. Without waiting for his family, he got into his car and drove off. Luckily, he didn't get far. After driving for a while, he crashed into a barrier at an intersection. Disoriented, he exited the car and began acting inappropriately. A passing driver noticed his odd behavior and called 911 to alert the police. Then, the night January 22, 2010, Neil hid a gun on the top shelf of his bedroom closet. It was a Smith & Wesson revolver, next to an open box of .38 Winchester cartridges and a letter he had opened 3 days earlier. 3 rifles were also concealed in nearby drawers. A birthday party for Neil's twin sons, Joshua and Eric, was planned for January 23. Family and friends would gather for the party, play laser tag and take souvenir photos. Unfortunately, the children never arrived at this party as they were soon tragically shot. Around 6 a.m. on January 23, 2010, while everyone was still asleep, a tragedy unfolded, just hours before the party. Neil woke up, retrieved a gun from the closet, and his wife Frankie heard the noise. Frankie was half awake, not understanding what was happening in the next room, so she called her husband, Neil, and asked him what he was doing. Neil emerged from the dressing room holding a gun and pointed it at Frankie's, 53 years old. He told her that it was over and there was no other way. Terrified, she pleaded with him not to do it, insisting that she wanted to live and asked about their children. Neil persistently told her that there was no other solution and that they all needed to go to another world. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Realizing he was serious, she rushed at him, in an attempt to take the gun from him to protect herself and their children. A life and death struggle broke out between them, and they fell to the floor. Frankie fought with all her strength to take the gun and save herself and the children, but her efforts were in vain. Neil was stronger. He managed to wrest the gun from her grasp and shot her twice in the face, killing she instantly. During the struggle, she suffered several injuries, including a knocked-out front tooth and cuts on her fingers. Then, Neil reloaded the gun, put more bullets in his pocket, and went to the children's room at the other end of the house. First, Neil went to Eric's room, where his son was still sleeping soundly and didn't hear the gunshots. Neil, without hesitation, raised the gun and aimed it at his son's head. He shot Eric twice in the face, causing blood to splatter up to the ceiling and cover the surrounding walls. Although Eric did not die immediately, but the boy began to moan and choke on his own blood. Neil then pressed a pillow to his son's face and fired 2 more shots. At this time, the boy showed no signs of life, and Neil concluded it was over. He reloaded the weapon and went to Joshua's room. Like Eric, Joshua was still fast asleep and did not hear a thing. Neil placed a pillow on Joshua's right cheek and shot him twice in the face. The boy didn't react. Neil checked to ensure the boy was dead, then he leaving the room. He returned to the bedroom, past Frankie's body, and went into the bathroom to wash the blood off his face and hands. Afterward, he took his car keys and attempted to rouse his deceased family members, telling each of them to come on quickly and adding that if they didn't get up, he would have to leave without them. Of course, none of them responded. The ambulance arrived at the scene. Neil was covered in blood, but only suffered minor injuries from the accident that occurred earlier. The officers attempted to speak with he. During a brief and unclear conversation, he repeatedly tried to find his gun and acted suspiciously. The police confiscated the gun and continued questioning him. During the conversation, he confessed to killing his family. He was detained until the incident could be clarified. The detectives quickly began their investigation. They went to the Jacobson family home in Wellington, Florida, near Palm Beach, to verify his statement, where they discovered a horrific scene: 3 bodies inside the house. The crime scene was undisturbed, with bodies in various locations throughout the home. There was a lot of blood, and all 3 family members were dead. Forensic experts started examining the house, while detectives interrogated Neil at the local police station, allowing them to piece together the incident of that terrible morning. During his conversations with detectives, Neil frequently referred to his suicide note. In this 5-page typewritten letter, he detailed the reasons for his planned murder and end his life. He wrote that he could no longer live like this. Everything in their lives was spiraling out of control. He felt it was necessary to kill his entire family and himself to prevent them from suffering due to his poor business decisions. The letter also revealed that he intended to visit his mother and kill her. This was confirmed when police searched his car and found the keys to his mother's house, which he had brought with him. He was heading towards her house when the accident occurred. The police thought Neil didn't mean to end his life. Instead, he lost control after taking medication and crashed. However, his mother disagreed, she believing he wasn't a threat. She blamed the bloody incident on January 23 on incorrect prescriptions from doctors, saying the medication was too strong and caused Neil to lose control of his actions. During questioning, Neil said on January 23, 2010, while his family was celebrating their children's birthdays, a special force arrested him. However, the two children Joshua and Eric did not survive to see their birthday party. This horrific case has shocked the entire town of Wellington. Many people close to the family and neighbors could not believe that Neil, a respected businessman, could do such a thing to his family. The defense argued that the murder was committed due to insanity, so Neil was sent for a psychiatric evaluation. While in prison, he met with psychiatrists multiple times. His mental state was very unstable. Sometimes he showed no emotions and seemed detached from reality, while other times he lost control and became hysterical, especially when he remembered his actions. In prison, doctors diagnosed him with deep depression and prescribed different medications. Initially, he seemed to improve, and his condition stabilized. However, after a few weeks, the psychiatrist stopped the treatment because his body reacted poorly to the medication. However, a subsequent examination revealed that, due to a medical error, Neil did not receive treatment for his main illness, hypothyroidism, related to the thyroid gland and hormonal balance. In this context, apathy, depression, and anxiety are very likely. It was determined that he was prescribed powerful psychotropic drugs without official justification. Not even a complete psychiatric examination was conducted. Furthermore, it was found that the doses of the prescribed medications he took could indeed cause the hallucinations and disorders that he experienced. Neil deeply loved his family. He and his wife were not only married but also best friends. He never did anything wrong with his wife and children and was devoted to them. However, he was severely impacted by the financial crisis, leg problems, and his father's death, and his treatment was ineffective. Neil claimed that he wasn't the one who harmed his family. During the 3 weeks he was on medication, he changed significantly, sleeping only 2 hours a day. One day, the medication had a severe effect on Neil's, making his brain feel like it was burning. That morning, he woke up hearing voices in his head commanding him. Initially, he resisted, but the voices became louder and more persistent. He genuinely believed that killing his entire family was the only way to protect them from the FBI. Prosecutors are asking for the sentence of death, under Florida law. However, many of Neil's relatives, including his lawyer, opposed such a severe punishment. They supported Neil, noting that before the tragic incident, he had never been cruel. Although he appeared worried and stressed about financial matters, but his family did not believe he was capable of such a violent act. The defense argued that a medical error led to the wrong treatment, and they demanded that the doctors be held accountable for the tragedy. The Palm Beach prosecutor mentioned that 2 copies of a suicide note had been discovered in the Jacobson family home. The note expressed love for the family and expressed feeling overwhelmed by their current circumstances. It stated that due to his short-sightedness, he had placed the family in a position of losing everything they had built. He admitted to participating in the real estate investment craze and felt confused about his actions. The note conveyed his desire not to leave his family in poverty and his inability to let them live in such conditions. He admitted that anxiety was consuming him and expressed shame. The first note was dated January 20th, and the second January 23rd, the same day as the triple homicide. This is considered evidence to classify the murder as premeditated, showing that he had planned his actions. Despite acting impulsively, but he admitted to having brought weapons home in advance and hiding them in the dressing room. Frankie was unaware of the presence of a pistol in the house and had no knowledge of the tragic incident that were to occur that morning. Neil had a clear memory of all the incident and was able to describe them in detail. A few days before the incident, Neil's mother visited him. During her visit, Neil repeatedly hugged her and said her that he loved her no matter what happened. This behavior raised doubts about his mental state. Despite this, the Frankie family viewed Neil as a coward and cruel man for allowing evil to take control and lead to the death of his entire family. The defense argued that Neil's inappropriate behavior, such as waking up and immediately rushing to the weapon closet, suggested a mental disorder. They claimed he was influenced by voices and experienced a breakdown due to medication. Friends and relatives confirmed these claims. Subsequently, an independent psychiatric examination diagnosed Neil with bipolar disorder type 2 and several other serious mental issues. These findings led to him being deemed insane at the time of the crime. Nonetheless, the lawyers believed the jury would not accept this insanity defense and advised Neil to negotiate a plea deal with the prosecution. To avoid the death penalty, Neil agreed to a deal. Consequently, in February 2012, he pleaded guilty to murdering 3 people. His death penalty was replaced with 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Initially, he was under special supervision by prison guards, which is common in cases with a high risk of end his life. Neil attempted to end his life 3 times, feeling he had nothing left to live for, but each time he was saved. As part of the plea bargain, his relatives are allowed to visit him twice a year. In prison, he works as a clerk in the library, helping prisoners choose books and find information. Fellow prisoners say that Neil cries every day in his cell when he is alone, regretting his actions. Before the verdict, he often stated that he was indifferent to the death penalty and even expected it as a form of release. For someone who was once a loving husband and father, living with this overwhelming guilt is unbearable. This year, his wife Frankie would have turned 78, and their children Eric and Joshua would have been 32. Instead, they will forever remain 53 and 7, buried together in one grave. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Rosana Galeano. Rosana Galeano was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in the late 1970s to parents Raldo and Graciela. She had 2 older brothers, Oscar and Gustavo, and a sister, Monica. During this time, Raldo, Rosana's father, worked as a mechanic. In 2001, Jose Arce brought his vintage car to Raldo's workshop for repairs. Jose was born on November 22, 1948. He spent more than 30 years living abroad, primarily in Greece and the United States. During his time in the United States, Jose was convicted of drug trafficking and served a 4-year prison sentence. He returned to Argentina in 1996 and owned 8 properties in a prestigious area of Buenos Aires. Despite their significant age difference, Jose and Rosana began dating shortly after meeting at her father's shop. At the time, Rosana was without a job and kept to herself, while Jose appeared to be financially stable. However, his wealth actually came from his mother, Elsa, who lived in the United States. Jose, who is 52 years old, proposed to Rosana, who is 22 years old. Rosana's mother, Graciela, expressed concerns about their significant age difference. Jose dismissed her worries, claiming that love knows no age. Rosana reassured her mother that she wanted to marry Jose, and they tied the knot on November 17, 2001, after a 7-month courtship. Jose initially thought his friendly and intelligent personality was the reason Rosana was attracted to him. They soon had a son, Geronimo. However, Jose's true nature soon became apparent, a controlling and jealous person. He frequently belittled Rosanna and her family, and has eventually turned physically abusive, leaving Rosanna feeling trapped and fearful. Jose's ownership of 2 guns added to his intimidating presence, allowing him to maintain control over Rosanna. Her family was aware of the situation and the pain it caused. Jose often flaunted his guns in front of visitors or when visiting others. On one occasion, Rosanna's brother Oscar witnessed Jose physically assaulting her while they were painting their house. On another occasion, Rosanna's father observed bruises on her back, bruises that she explained were caused by Jose dragging her on the ground. Rosanna and Jose had their second child, but their relationship continued to deteriorate. Jose's hot temper and lack of respect have repeatedly strained their relationship, making it difficult for her to maintain a healthy home for her children despite her best efforts. The situation was further complicated by Jose's mother, Elsa, who would visit from time to time and exert control over their household decisions. By 2006, Rosanna had suffered severe abuse at the hands of Jose and decided to report him to the authorities for domestic violence. A few months later, Rosanna filed a second complaint, this time she requesting a medical examination to document her injuries. Rosanna opened up to her sister Monica about her struggles, and they made a promise to stay connected and be there for each other whenever Rosanna needed assistance. Monica becomes Rosanna's rock, comforting and supporting her emotionally during difficult times. Whenever Rosanna visited Monica's apartment with her children, Jose would often dictate when they had to return home, threatening to harm her. He frequently belittled Rosanna, questioning her ability to be a mother. Ultimately, Rosanna decided to leave Jose and move in with Monica, leaving him to stay in their house alone. Rosanna filed another complaint and sought a divorce, which led to a restraining order being issued against Jose. As a result, they were only allowed to meet at a neutral location in El Remanso Exel de la Cruz, as arranged by the court, for Jose to visit their child. During one of her visits, Rosanna confided in Daniel Gonzalez, a married man, who worked as a gardener and lived nearby with his own daughter. Although there were rumors about a relationship between Rosanna and Daniel, this was never confirmed. Meanwhile, Jose continued to make threats against Rosanna, including a disturbing voicemail, in which Jose explicitly threatened to kill her, and she shared this message with her brother Oscar. In 2007, Rosanna met Oscar Lugo at a bar while socializing with friends. He was 32 years old, lived in Marino, and worked in a sewing workshop. They quickly connected, exchanged numbers, and began dating. Oscar was a kind, attentive, and gentleman who listened to Rosanna. At 29 years old, Rosanna felt like she was rediscovering a life she had almost forgotten. However, their budding relationship was soon threatened by Rosanna's ex-husband, Jose. He closely monitored Rosanna's activities and was aware of her new relationship with Oscar. Jose wants to prevent his divorce from Rosanna and is terrified when he hears that Rosanna has started a new relationship. He offers give Rosanna a truck in exchange for ending her relationship with Oscar Lugo, but she refuses. When Rosanna had a severe nervous breakdown, it was Oscar who accompanied her to the hospital. Out of desperation, Jose devised a plan with the help of his mother Elsa. They secretly planned to hire an assassin to kill Rosanna. On January 16, 2008, Rosanna and her sister Monica went to El Reno to pick up Rosanna's 2 sons, aged 4 and 3, from their father Jose. However, Jose delayed the handover, making excuses. At 9:15 p.m., Jose called Rosanna, claiming their son Geronimo had a fever and that he would take him to the hospital and return him the next day. Rosanna insisted on taking care of Geronimo herself, but the call ended abruptly. Rosanna then sent a casual text message to Oscar Lugo at 9:53 p.m. about their plans for the next day. At 10 p.m., Rosanna and Monica sat down for dinner when Jose called again. This time, Rosanna stepped out into the garden to get better phone reception. Unbeknownst to her, a person was hiding behind the trees. As she was on the phone, the person emerged and shot Rosanna 4 times with a .45 caliber gun. Monica, who was inside, heard the shots and saw Rosanna stumble and collapse. Panicked, Monica tried to call 911 but was unsuccessful. She then asked her boyfriend to alert the police. Meanwhile, Oscar Lugo tried to contact Rosanna at 11 p.m. but couldn't reach her. He then tried to call Monica but got no response. The police investigation revealed that the shooter had entered the property through an adjacent vacant lot. A witness reported seeing someone fleeing through a gap in the fence but couldn't provide a clear description due to the darkness. Jose was questioned by the police and appeared shocked. After requesting a lawyer, he let the lawyer handle the proceedings and left the next day. During a thorough search of the area, a red sweater was discovered that Rosanna's family believed belonged to Jose, which led them to suspect him of the crime. The case quickly gained widespread media attention, shocking the nation and sparking a scandal. Jose and his mother publicly maintained his innocence and criticized Rosanna, claiming that she had multiple sexual partners and that they should be investigated for this crime instead of Jose. Following the incident, Daniel, the gardener, became withdrawn and isolated, refusing to speak to anyone. On the night of Rosanna's funeral, Raldo noticed Jose watching from a distance in a truck, but he did not attend the funeral or offer any condolences. Jose's defense team then shifted their focus to Monica, who was Rosanna's sister and the only witness to the case. They questioned Monica's credibility, pointing out 2 key inconsistencies in her story. Firstly, Monica did not have any blood on her clothes, which raised suspicions about her account of what happened. Secondly, instead of immediately helping her younger sister, Monica chose to run and get her phone. However, this theory lacked supporting evidence. The investigators presented a strong argument that the murder weapon was too heavy for a woman to handle. They also pointed out that the killer likely knew the house well, as they would have been aware that Rosanna had to go outside to get a cell phone signal. This suggests that the crime was planned in advance. During the investigation, Rosanna's sons were cared for by their father and paternal grandmother Elsa, and their grandmother Graciela was allowed to visit them. However, Monica and Oscar are not allowed near the children, as Jose expresses concern for his son's safety. Despite the court's restrictions, the children still wanted to see Aunt Monica, so Jose allowed them to visit her. During these visits, Monica took the children to see a psychologist. Eventually, Graciela was granted visitation rights to her grandchildren, though not guardianship. In an interview, Jose made some serious allegations about Rosanna, claiming she had 4 lovers who all had run-ins with the law. Jose suspects Rosanna of being involved with these men, and she has been gathering information about them for blackmail. Meanwhile, Oscar was given protection as a witness in his sister's case, which included wearing a tracking device and having a police escort. By the end of 2007, investigators still hadn't found enough evidence to charge any of the suspects. However, a significant turning point occurred in January 2008 when Jose was arrested and charged with aggravated homicide. This charge was based on 3 key factors: his connection to the victim, evidence that suggested he had planned the crime in advance, and the fact that multiple people were involved in the crime. On January 28, 2008, the preliminary hearings began. At the hearings, 4 people, including Raldo, Graciela, Monica, and Oscar, described Jose's disturbing behavior, including his repeated use of violence and weapons to threaten others. Rosanna's mother also presented the prosecutor with the last text messages her daughter had sent before her death. The following day, Oscar Lugo, who used to date Rosanna, testified against Jose, provided testimony similar to that of Rosanna's family. According to Oscar Lugo, Jose had tried to ruin his and Rosanna's reputations by spreading false rumors. Oscar Lugo said Rosanna suspected José's fabrications were intended to discredit her as she and José were about to divorce. Opposite, José's lawyer disputed the claims that José was emotionally unstable and aggressive. On February 7, 2008, José's mother, Elsa, traveled from the United States to testify in a 12-hour investigative session. However, Rosanna's family began to suspect that José's mother might have been involved in her murder. This suspicion led Raldo and Graciela's lawyer to consider requesting José's mother's arrest. In response, José and his mother's lawyer argued that her testimony actually showed she was prioritizing her grandchildren's well-being. According to Elsa's testimony, she purchased houses for them because she believed the divorce settlement would not negatively impact them. The lawyer also denied the media's claim that José's mother and Rosanna had a poor relationship. Despite ongoing speculation and media coverage surrounding the circumstances of Rosanna's death, José was released on bail and gained custody of his children. Meanwhile, the court deemed it unnecessary to provide police protection for Oscar, Rosanna's brother, who worked as a taxi driver. However, on July 5, 2008, Oscar was attacked by two armed men in the early morning. They beat and threatened him for an hour before abandoning him in a vacant lot. Fortunately, Oscar was found thanks to the protective witness tracking bracelet he wore. Oscar was deeply shaken by the event, though not severely injured. The trial next began in April 2013. José maintained his innocence throughout the proceedings. However, in May, the trial was delayed when José suffered a stroke, pushing the final verdict back to November 2013. The judge determined that the murder was carefully and deliberately planned, bearing the hallmarks of organized crime. The court concluded that José and Elsa were involved in planning the attack. They deliberately chose the time and place to put Rosanna in a passive position and unable to defend herself. Specifically, they targeting her after a phone call would lure her outside. The court ultimately determined that José's primary motive for the murder was financial, because he did not want to divide the joint property with Rosanna. As a result, José and Elsa were sentenced to life imprisonment. The higher court upheld the conviction, emphasizing José's threatening behavior, the domestic violence Rosanna suffered, and the significant influence his mother had over him. Years later, in 2015, José and Elsa were granted house arrest due to health and age concerns, respectively. This allowed them to be reunited with their children. Throughout this time, the media continued to follow the story of the children. In January 2017, the court allowed the children to spend a weekend with their maternal grandparents for the first time. The Rosanna Galliano family thoroughly prepared their home, repainting and cleaning the house, and decorating it with balloons and a welcome sign. Graciela also cooked the children's favorite meal in anticipation of their arrival. The Rosanna Galliano home was filled with joy that weekend, as the boys spent happy time together, playing soccer and video games, and even asked to sleep in their grandmother's bed, whom they hadn't seen in over 2 years. However, their happiness was short-lived. On November 24, 2018, José passed away after suffering another stroke. This was a devastating blow for the children. Aunt Monica reassured them with love and calmness, promising to support whatever decision they made. The boys decided to live with Aunt Monica. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Soni Millbrook. Soni Millbrook was born on February 15, 1981, in Memphis, Tennessee, USA. She is the daughter of Christine Millbrook Bennett and grew up in a large family with many siblings, having 2 sisters and 3 brothers. This warm and close-knit environment helped her build a special relationship with her cousin Jenny during her teenage years. Sony became a popular student at her high school. In 1998, when she was 17 years old and in the 11th grade, she met a man named Lakeith Moody, who was older than her. She soon began a relationship with him. However, the relationship was not a happy one, as Lakeith was abusive and violent, leaving visible injuries on Sony's body. Despite this, they had 4 children, 3 girls and a boy named after his father. In 1999, Sony's mother discovered a bruise on Sony's chest. When her mother asked her about it, Sony cried and confessed that Lakeith had caused the injury. A friend of Sony's also witnessed the injury, but Sony refused to report Lakeith's behavior to the police. Lakeith often controlled Sony and tried to isolate her from her friends and family. That same year, Sony moved into an apartment in the Fraser neighborhood of Memphis. One day, the management informed her of an incident at her apartment. When she arrived, she found a chaotic scene: damaged furniture, missing clothes, a destroyed television, food smeared on the walls, and personal hygiene products scattered everywhere, including under the stairs. Strangely, the mirror had the words, "Kiki loves you," with Kiki being Lakeith's nickname. Lakeith's behavior made Sony's relatives even more concerned. On October 31, 2000, Sony and her cousin, Pamela, went to a bar called The Mirage with Lakeith. While at the bar, Lakeith became aggressive towards Sony by slapping her and throwing a drink in her face. After the incident, Sony and Pamela left the bar and got into their car. According to Pamela, Sony was shaken and frightened by Lakeith's actions. Sony asked Pamela to take her home immediately because she was afraid that Lakeith would come after them. When Sony got home, she locked the door securely. An hour later, Lakeith came to the house, yelling and banging on the door. Pamela had to threaten to call the police to make Lakeith leave. Once Sony calmed down, her cousin decided to leave her alone. However, that evening, Pamela received a call informing her that Sony had been hospitalized. Lakeith had forced his way into the house, and when Sony tried to end the relationship, he attacked her. He tore off Sony's clothes and hit her on the head, face, chest, arms, and between her thighs. She suffered bruises all over her body, loose teeth, and even lost consciousness because Lakeith choked her until she passed out. Lakeith later accidentally discovered that Sony was on birth control pills, and he attacked her again. The next morning, Sony called Pamela and asked her cousin to take her to the hospital because of serious health problems. In late 2008, Sony, then 27, worked at a Christian institute. She was considered a reliable and punctual employee. Therefore, when she took time off or missed work, it was usually due to important reasons. Once, she called her supervisor to report that she could not come to work because her face was badly bruised, and she did not want the children to see it. After she asked for a day off, Director Leslie approved it. However, when Sony returned a few days later, the bruises were so obvious that the director allowed her to wear sunglasses while working at the academy. Lakeith's violence not only affected Sony and their children but also caused concern in the community. In April 2008, Lakeith was found sitting in an SUV with a gun in his hand, despite being previously prohibited from owning a gun due to a criminal record. Furthermore, he had previously served 2 years in prison for burglary and 3 years in prison for drug possession with intent to distribute. Sony tried to avoid her boyfriend, but it was almost impossible. The situation came to a head on October 6, 2008. At that time, Sony did not arrive at the academy by 5 p.m. Her sister received a text message from Sony saying that Lakeith was holding her hostage in his home and had been beating her all day. Sony also provided her home address. Sony's sister called the police. 2 officers went to Sony's house. They knocked on the door, but there was no answer since it was locked from the inside. They then called the security department to unlock the door. When the police entered the house, they saw Sony's boyfriend jumping out of the back window of the apartment. Sony stood in the hallway, crying and unable to speak because of her grief. Her 4 children were also present, making for a very heartbreaking scene. Sony's face and neck were covered in bruises and scratches. When she calmed down, Sony explained what had happened. Sony and Lakeith began arguing, and he refused to let her leave the house. She told the police that Lakeith would not let her or the children near the window. She also said that Lakeith injured one of their children by grabbing the child and preventing her from taking the child to the hospital. Sony said that her boyfriend had been both physically and verbally abusive. During one altercation, he tied a baby blanket around her neck and choked her until she lost consciousness. When the police arrived, Lakeith threatened to choke her again and said he would kill her if the police did not let him go. The police searched the area but did not find Lakeith. Sony then left the house with the children in her car. 3 days later, she filed a restraining order against Lakeith, fearing for her life and wanting to prevent any contact with him. However, she missed the hearing, and the protective order was never granted. Nearly 6 months later, on March 10, 2009, Sony was still in contact with Lakeith. That day, he was supposed to pick up the children for a doctor's appointment, but instead, he began arguing with Sony, accusing her of having a new boyfriend. The argument quickly turned violent as he slapped her and pulled her hair. She tried to break free and ran out of the apartment while Lakeith screamed and threatened to kill her. Lakeith did not catch Sony but instead kidnapped their youngest child, an infant, and drove away at high speed. A police patrol alerted to the domestic disturbance arrived as Lakeith was running away. The officers attempted to stop him, but he escaped. In early 2010, Sony, 28, was studying at Southeast Tennessee Community College. She had to stay home to care for her 5th child, who was 9 weeks old, because of poor health. In January, Sony and the children moved into the Budget Lodge in Memphis. However, on the first day Sony moved in, she and Lakeith's arguments became so loud that motel staff had to intervene because they were disturbing other guests. Sony and Lakeith could not maintain a peaceful relationship. They argued constantly, disturbing neighbors and management with the noise. On January 22, a hotel security guard witnessed Lakeith in a very agitated state. He arrived at a high rate of speed in Sony's car and then began yelling at her as she stood on the second-floor balcony with the children. In his anger, he threw a bag of groceries at her. The security guard arrived and told Lakeith not to make any noise or throw things in the hotel. Lakeith was instructed to settle the argument in his room. However, Lakeith told the security guard that he did not need to worry about it. Lakeith then locked his car and accompanied the security guard to an unoccupied room on the 3rd floor. The security guard asked Lakeith to hand over any hotel keys he had. Surprisingly, Lakeith had keys to 3 different rooms, even though he was not registered as a guest. The next day, Lakeith and Sony moved into room 222 with their children. However, the night manager asked Lakeith to leave that evening. Although Lakeith left as requested, he soon returned. The arguments between Sony and Lakeith continued for several more days until the guard asked Lakeith to leave the hotel for good. As Lakeith left, the front desk clerk tried to calm him down. The guard also warned Lakeith not to come back that night. Lakeith got into her car and drove away. Some time later, Sony spoke to Pamela and confided that she was having problems in her life. She was staying at the motel and wanted to talk to Pamela about something important. Sony said that she would call if she left the motel or if her boyfriend left first. The next day started normally. At 7 a.m., Sony took the younger children to daycare and the older children to school. Around 11 a.m., the housekeeping manager knocked on Sony's door and spoke to her through the window to inform her that they needed to pay the rent or they would have to leave. The manager returned several times that day. On a visit around 2:30 p.m., Lakeith answered the door. The room was dark. Lakeith told the manager that his mother was on her way to pick up the money. On January 27th, Sony did not pick up her older daughter on time. So the school secretary called the child's grandmother, Christine, to ask her to come pick up the girl. When Christine tried to contact Sony, she received no response. At around 6 p.m., she discovered that her other grandchildren were still at daycare. Concerned that she could not reach Sony, Christine asked her husband to pick up the younger children from daycare while she went to the school to find out what was wrong. They contacted the police and reported the incident at approximately 10:30 p.m. Later, on January 28th, the housekeeping manager re-entered room 222 and began taking inventory of the items that Sony and Lakeith had left behind. The room was filled with clothing in a large trash bag, which was then taken to a storage area. After the room was cleaned, it was ready for new guests. On January 29th, James and Rhonda Sargent moved into the room. They quickly noticed a foul odor and attempted to block it with incense, but were unable to eliminate it completely. They also discovered that previous tenants had attempted the same, as they found scented tissues in the tiles and ceiling vents. Because the smell was so strong that they reported it. On January 29th, officers from the Memphis Police Department's Missing Persons Unit visited the hotel to inquire about Sony's whereabouts, as that was where she was last seen. However, they did not enter room 222. Lakeith was arrested on February 2nd, around 7 p.m., while inside Sony's car at a shopping center. He was held for 48 hours on a charge of car theft. During questioning about Sony's disappearance, Lakeith said he last saw her on January 26th. He explained they had met in the hotel parking lot that morning after Sony had dropped off her children at school. They went into the room, had sex, and then returned outside. Lakeith then took Sony's car keys and left the hotel. He claimed Sony planned to use her welfare and student loan money to buy a new car, so he wasn't worried about keeping her car. Lakeith also said he had been living in the car since January 26th. However, investigators discovered that Lakeith had actually been staying at a different hotel. Additionally, given the snowy weather during that time, it was unlikely that he had spent the night in the car. On February 3rd, police found a debit card with Sony's name on it and several recent purchase receipts inside the car. That same day, police also searched the clothes stored at the hotel for DNA or other evidence, but found nothing. Due to the lack of evidence linking Lakeith to Sony's disappearance, he was released. Sony's cousin and her mother had to undertake the painful task of going to the hotel where Sony was staying to collect her belongings. At that time, Sony's cousin had a bad feeling but did not find any evidence. On February 4th, the police went to Sony's cousin's house and found a DVD player in Sony's wallet. Sony's cousin said they had received the items from Moody. According to the cousin, Lakeith borrowed the DVD player on January 24th under the pretext of watching a movie and drove a red car that day. When he saw Lakeith again a few days later, the cousin asked why Lakeith did not pick up the children on January 27th. But Lakeith evaded the question. When the cousin asked about Sony's whereabouts, Lakeith left the DVD player and wallet behind and left. Around that time, guests James and Rhonda Sargent requested to be moved out of room 222 because of the persistent odor. Since there were no other rooms available, they moved to another hotel. Later guests in room 222 also complained of a foul odor, despite the room being cleaned several times and the carpets being cleaned in early February. The odor persisted, only easing slightly over several days. On February 4th, homicide detectives arrived at the hotel to investigate. By this time, room 222 had been occupied and cleaned at least 3 times. As a result, the detectives were unable to enter the room to collect evidence. Instead, they asked hotel staff if they had noticed anything unusual. All staff responded that nothing was unusual. Then, on February 7th, James and Rhonda returned to the hotel and changed rooms 3 times. During one of the changes, they spent the night in room 222. While there, they informed management that the room still smelled unpleasant. To address this issue, in March, the hotel performed a more thorough cleaning of room 222. The staff cleaned the carpet, bedding, shower curtains, and window blinds. However, the results were shocking. The odor not only remained but became even more intense. The manager discussed the issue with the security guard. During the conversation, they recalled that the previous tenant, Sony, had disappeared at the end of January. The security guard recalled the events that occurred at that time and suggested that the manager check room 222 for traces of blood or cleaning agents. 10 minutes later, the manager returned and asked the guard to accompany him. What they found was horrifying. The 2 men entered the room where the manager had removed the mattress from one of the beds, leaving only the bed frame. The bottom of the bed frame had a cover. When they lifted the box spring, they discovered a large gap where anything could be hidden from view. Looking through the sturdy edges of the bed frame, they saw the unthinkable, a decomposing body. They called the police, who arrived at the scene shortly after. The bed frame was found to have many marks on it, and there were 2 pieces of broken wood near the headboard. A towel and a cloth bag were found between the legs of the body. The victim was wearing a shirt but nothing below the waist. The forensic team's autopsy determined that the cause of death was strangulation with a coaxial cable. The cable was wrapped around the neck, under one arm, around the chest, and ended behind the back. The medical examiner concluded that it would take at least 2 to 3 minutes of sustained pressure to cause death. In order to find the killer, the police collected items from between the victim's legs for analysis. The victim's shirt had an unidentified fingerprint. In addition, the scarf and the cloth bag did not belong to the victim. DNA samples that matched Sony's genetic profile, as well as that of a woman, were discovered. More remarkably, male DNA was also found on the cable, which led to the hypothesis that Sony had died at the time she was reported missing. The coaxial cable used in the case may have come from a DVD player that Lakeith borrowed from her cousin. Lakeith had been arrested by police for illegal possession of a weapon, and he was also the last person seen with Sony alive, making him a suspect in the case. He was in Sony's car when he was arrested and taken to the Mason detention facility. On March 18th, authorities launched an investigation into why the case unfolded in such a strange way. The chief of police said the victim's family deserved an explanation and acknowledged that the circumstances of the case were unprecedented, making it a shocking case of domestic violence. He also regretted that the room where Sony died had been cleaned and rented out multiple times, making it difficult for police to collect evidence. However, this explanation was met with skepticism. One of the first tenants, Rhonda, said the police should have been allowed into the room when James and Rhonda visited in January and would have found Sony sooner if they had noticed the smell of a decomposing body. Rhonda believes the police were slow in finding Sony. Following the loss, Sony's family held a funeral for her on March 24th. Sony's children were placed in the care of her sister on April 1st. They are currently trying to gain legal custody of the children. Sony's sister said that although the children were the primary victims, everyone in the family's lives was turned upside down by the loss. She pledged to take care of Sony's children, making sure they had enough food, clothes, and toys, and to keep them together as a family. She also said Sony had benefited from a social program, and she would continue to care for the children as her sister had. The card had been loaded with money before Sony went missing because she received an income tax refund. Police tracked the card's activity and found that it was in Lakeith's possession. During the surveillance, They noticed that the card was used on February 1st at a convenience store Sony usually visited to withdraw cash using her electronic welfare transfer card. Notably, this occurred 4 days after Sony went missing. Officers went to the store and requested the owner to show them the footage from their 16 security cameras. Through the footage, they observed that on the morning of February 1st, at 11:38 a.m., a man dressed in yellow conducted a transaction at the store. He used a Sony card to buy a bottle of orange juice, withdrew cash, and purchased a cigar. After making these purchases, he returned to a car driven by someone else. With all the evidence against him, Lakeith's trial began in the first week of February 2014, more than 4 years after the crime. By then, the Budget Lodge Hotel involved in the crime had closed. Lakeith did not admit his guilt. During the trial, the prosecutor portrayed the case as the tragic end of a tumultuous relationship. In contrast, Lakeith's defense attorney argued that there was insufficient evidence to establish his client's guilt. He pointed out that there were no witnesses or physical evidence to prove Lakeith's crime. The attorney also noted that the police found fingerprints on the victim's bed frame, but those fingerprints did not match Lakeith's. This suggests that someone else may have been involved in the crime. Additionally, the attorney argued that there was reason to suspect that the victim had had relationships with several other men over the years. He also emphasized that his client had never been convicted of domestic violence against the victim. Furthermore, he revealed something that the public did not know. Sony moved in with Lakeith again because she had to leave a relative's home due to a rat infestation. On February 6th, video footage showing Lakeith using a Sony prepaid card 4 days after her death was presented to the court. The defense claimed his calm demeanor throughout the transaction demonstrated his innocence, while the prosecution saw it as evidence of a cold and ruthless man with no regard for the crimes he was accused of committing. On February 7, 2014, he was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. On February 10, he appealed the conviction, arguing that the court had erred in considering his past acts of domestic violence and that the evidence was insufficient. On July 7, 2015, the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the convictions, affirming the decision. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Dawn Hatcheney. Dawn Hatcheney was born on December 5, 1969, in Seattle, Washington. Her parents are Donald Tihara and Diana Parle. Her father, Donald, worked at a shipyard, and her mother, Diana, ran the household. Dawn is the oldest child and only daughter, with 3 younger brothers, Dennis, Darren, and Derek. Her family lives in Bremerton, Washington. According to her mother Diana, Dawn showed her religious devotion from an early age, embracing her faith and accepting God into her life when she was 4 years old. Dawn's childhood was difficult, however. Her parents suffered from anxiety and depression, leading to frequent conflicts at home. Despite these challenges in her childhood, Dawn did well in school, promising herself to get good grades. At age 12, she entered the Scripps National Spelling Bee, an experience that not only led her to the White House but also gave her the opportunity to meet the late President Ronald Reagan. Dawn graduated from Bremerton Christian School as valedictorian in 1988 before attending Northwest College of the Church of God in Seattle. While in college, Dawn met Nick Hatchey and they quickly formed a strong bond. However, her friends were concerned when she started calling him the one after only a few dates. They wanted Dawn to find someone who would truly care for and support her, but they worried that Nick was too aggressive and self-assured, which didn't seem to fit Dawn's personality. Interestingly, Nick's upbringing has some similarities to Dawn's. Nick was born and raised in Poulsbo, a coastal city in Washington. His family life was difficult from an early age. His father, Dan, was constantly immersed in his work as a mechanic, always distant when at home, neglecting his time and responsibilities for the family. His mother, Sandra, ran a daycare in the home and provided foster care, but Nick felt abandoned. He often confided in friends that he felt less loved than his siblings and even his foster children, and that his mother's affection for him was distasteful. Life was difficult with a depressed mother and a father who often neglected the family. Nick felt abandoned and emotionally isolated. Despite this, he found comfort in the Bible and became deeply involved in Christianity. His faith gave him confidence throughout his adolescence. Nick and Dawn first met in college. At first, Dawn's friends were confused by her interest in Nick, whose personality was the complete opposite of hers. Over time, they noticed a significant change in Dawn's behavior. Normally, she was confident, outgoing, independent, motivated, and always striving to achieve new goals. However, when she was with Nick, her personality changed dramatically. She became shy, introverted, and indecisive, often putting Nick's interests above her own, even when they made her feel uncomfortable. It seemed that Nick's influence brought out the worst in her, rather than the best. Despite this, their love continued to grow and their relationship remained strong. In 1990, Nick proposed to Dawn on Alki Beach and they became engaged. They married on April 20, 1991, and then moved back to Bremerton. By this time, both Dawn and Nick had completed their education. Dawn began working as a loan officer, and Nick began his work as a youth pastor at Christ Community Church on Bainbridge Island, near Seattle. Nick had a desire to become a youth pastor, specifically targeting Christ Community Church due to his relationship with his former youth pastor, Bob, also known as P.B. Smith. At the time, P.B. Smith remained at the church, having overseen the church's affairs since the late 1980s, but now partnered with Pastor Robert Billy Craig to lead the congregation. P.B. Smith took a more friendly but conservative approach to church leadership, while Pastor Robert was known for his strict teachings. In their marriage, Nick made decisions without his wife Dawn, largely because they adhered to the principles of Christian fundamentalism. These principles dictate that the wife submit to the authority of her husband, which Nick and Dawn believed was in line with God's plan. At Christ Community Church, this ideology was clearly promoted and considered acceptable. The church even performed exorcisms for its members, encouraged large families as a divine mandate, and advocated homeschooling for children. Modesty in women was emphasized and questions about sexuality were taboo. Those who disagreed with these norms risked expulsion from the church, creating a climate of silence among dissenters for fear of expulsion. Dawn and her congregation are mired in what many call a cult, with her husband, Nick, playing a key role in these dangerous activities. Initially, Nick admires P.B. Smith, but he soon becomes dissatisfied with P.B. Smith's laid-back approach and feels he has not learned enough. He turns his admiration to Pastor Robert, who has a more extreme and strict approach. Nick seeks direct advice from Robert, distancing himself from his close relationship with P.B. Smith. In contrast, Pastor Robert sees Nick as an opportunity to advance his own agenda. He wants to remove P.B. Smith from his position as senior pastor and take control of the church. Robert's intentions are not sincere and he uses Nick to achieve his own goals. Meanwhile, Nick and his wife Dawn are facing challenges in their personal lives. They are constantly moving from house to house, renovating properties to sell. Dawn grew tired of this lifestyle and longed to settle down in a permanent home. By 1997, these issues were causing tension in their relationship. Nick found a house in need of repair in East Bremerton, planning to move in, renovate, and make it their home. However, the purchase, renovation, and home business plunged the couple into debt. Although their relationship seemed perfect, with Dawn seemingly a supportive wife who agreed with Nick's plans, there were underlying issues that were not immediately apparent. At the same time, Nick was getting into more debt by frequently lending money to people in their church. Nick embarked on his ambitious project of establishing a Christian youth camp. Despite financial difficulties, his passion for the project kept him going. He searched for the perfect location in Jefferson County, confident that he would find the ideal location. His determination intensified when a congregant, a woman named Sandy Glass, asserted receiving a divine vision affirming that the property Nick had his eye on was destined to become the site of the youth camp he envisioned. Sandy Glass, then in her early 20s, had faced hardships in her life. She had lost her first boyfriend to illness and her father in a construction accident. Her brother was addicted to drugs. Sandy was married to Jimmy, a carpenter, and they were struggling financially. A stay-at-home mother, Sandy depended on Jimmy's income, but her tendency to overspend often led to arguments between them. These disagreements sometimes caused Jimmy to scream or retreat, spending hours at the bar venting his frustrations. To resolve their marital problems, the couple sought help from the church and began attending marriage counseling sessions led by Nick, who had been the church's marriage counselor for many years. However, many parishioners filed complaints with Robert about Nick's counseling style, feeling uncomfortable with the way he prioritized intimate and often sexual topics over other important issues. Because of their trust in P.B. Smith, who was still affiliated with the church, members felt that Nick would not have been entrusted with the role if he were not trustworthy. However, in the fall of 1997, Pastor Robert took over as senior pastor, a move that was fully supported by the church council, replacing P.B. Smith. P.B. Smith and his wife then left to do missionary work in Africa. Jimmy's parents, who were also churchgoers, considered Sandy and Jimmy's decision to seek church intervention to be a hasty one. They even questioned Nick's qualifications and experience in guiding their son's marriage. Their concerns grew when they noticed that Nick focused a lot of his attention on Sandy, rather than Sandy and Jimmy as a couple. This attention was not limited to counseling sessions. Nick and Sandy spent a lot of time talking on the phone and meeting outside of church. Jimmy's parents felt that the relationship between Nick and Sandy was unacceptable. They spent a lot of time together and seemed closer than a normal counselor and client should be. Pastor Robert's wife, Pamela, also noticed Nick's behavior and spoke to him privately about it. She told him that he needed to focus on his marriage and that his actions were inappropriate. After much complaining, Pastor Robert stepped in and told Sandy that her relationship with Nick was not working and needed to end. Sandy was angry with Pastor Robert's advice because she believed that she and Nick had a special relationship with God. She wrote him a letter saying that his judgment made it difficult for her to think that he believed in her ability to listen to God and help others. The relationship between Sandy and Nick had a negative impact on those around them. Dawn and Jimmy, as well as Jimmy's children from his previous marriage to Sandy, felt hurt and betrayed. One of the children even told Jimmy that Nick and Sandy had discussed Nick becoming their new father after Jimmy's death. Dawn began sharing with friends at church about her financial difficulties and her desire to have children, a desire that Nick strongly opposed. As 1997 drew to a close, Nick had relationships with several women in addition to Sandy. He engaged in private conversations and lengthy phone calls with these women. At the same time, Sandy's alleged visions grew stronger, prompting Nick to prioritize the establishment of her youth camp and devote more time to their relationship, as she believed they were destined to be together. On the contrary, Dawn made a lot of effort to rekindle Nick's happiness with her, even trying to lose weight. Some of the women in the congregation supported her, telling her that the problems in their relationship were not her fault, but Nick's own. Unfortunately, Dawn's life with Nick did not turn out as she had hoped when they got married. When Christmas came, Dawn woke up feeling unwell with a cold. Despite being sick, she and Nick spent the day with their family. That evening, they visited P.B. Smith's house and spent time with his family. Nick had plans to go hunting with Lindsay, P.B. Smith's daughter, and her friends the next morning, the 26th. Nick met his friends at the Hood Canal Bridge in Jefferson County to go hunting just before dawn. They spent a few hours in the woods without shooting anything and decided to leave. Around 9 a.m., they went to a local diner for breakfast. While eating, Nick suddenly stood up, looking worried, and said, "Dawn and I haven't opened our Christmas presents yet." He left the diner at 9:30 a.m. and arrived home at 10 a.m. to find his wife dead in a fire. When police arrived on the scene, they discovered that the fire had initially started in the bedroom, due to a malfunctioning space heater. The fire quickly spread due to newspapers and wrapping paper in the room, and was made worse by multiple propane tanks on the floor. Nick told friends at the diner that he and his family had not opened their Christmas presents. But he told police a different story. According to Nick, they had actually opened their presents the night before. He said that Dawn had gone to bed feeling unwell and left the wrapping paper scattered around. Nick also confirmed that he had received a propane tank as a Christmas present. The couple was in the process of renovating their home and had used the heater to stay warm during the winter. However, these old fireplaces were not as safe as modern ones and often caused fires and deaths. The police found no inconsistencies in Nick's story. As a local pastor, Nick's status in the community gave the police no reason to suspect anything else. And his wife's death, which was ruled an accident. The congregation was concerned for Nick's health and wanted to support him during this difficult time. Pastor Robert even offered to try to revive Dawn through prayer, but Nick refused, saying he did not want her to suffer any potential pain. This refusal surprised Robert, as Nick had previously been willing to participate in church activities, including the exorcisms they had performed. Mary Glass, Sandy's mother-in-law, immediately suspected Nick of being involved in Dawn's death. Convinced that it was no accident, she urged her husband to report the situation to the police, but this never happened. Soon after, the police officially declared Dawn's death an accident and referred the case to Nick's insurance company. Nick began the process of collecting on Dawn's life insurance, which raised some suspicions from family and friends. They thought it was unusual for Nick to settle the insurance so quickly after Dawn's death, but they understood that the couple had significant debt and that Nick needed the money to pursue his plans for the youth camp. Some church members found Nick's way of grieving unusual, but they refrained from expressing concern, believing that everyone deals with grief differently. The church community came together to remember Dawn's life at her funeral. Family and friends shared stories and remembered her life. Although everyone was sad, Nick remained calm throughout and even gave a 45-minute speech in Dawn's honor. When friends helped him clean out his house, they found several photos of Dawn hidden in the back of a closet, making it seem as though he wanted to throw them away. After that, Nick's behavior became increasingly harsh and insensitive, not only toward some church members but also toward neighbors and friends. He had many romantic relationships with women in the congregation. In a shocking turn of events, Nick began an intimate relationship with Diana, Dawn's mother, under the guise of grief over his widowhood. His actions became too much for Pastor Robert to bear, and Nick was asked to leave Christ Community Church. This eviction had a significant impact on Nick, marking the beginning of his growing troubles. On April 10, 2001, Sandy and her attorney met with the district attorney. The district attorney offered Sandy immunity in exchange for her testimony about a secret she had kept since December 26, 1997. According to Sandy, on the morning of Dawn's death, Nick called her and said, "I did it." However, their conversation was abruptly interrupted by another incoming call on Sandy's phone, leaving Nick waiting to answer the call from someone at the church who had informed him of Dawn's case. After the second call ended, Sandy returned to the conversation with Nick and asked him to clarify what he meant. Nick simply repeated, "It's over, it's over." Sandy did not ask for further details about the call for several weeks. Eventually, Sandy confronted Nick, who confessed to giving Dawn an overdose of Benadryl and then suffocating her by placing a plastic bag over her face. Tragically, Dawn was still partially conscious and aware of what her husband was doing as she suffocated. After she died, Nick carefully placed old newspapers and wrapping paper around the room, including under her body, and placed propane tanks near the bed. He then turned on the heater to burn and start the fire, in an attempt to destroy any evidence of the crime and make it look like an accident. Dawn's autopsy revealed no soot or carbon monoxide in her lungs or blood. The pathologist who examined Dawn ruled her death an accidental fire. They missed crucial evidence of carbon monoxide binding to red blood cells, suggesting that she had not been breathing during the fire. Despite having 5 times the normal amount of Benadryl in her system, the pathologist concluded that the amount was not enough to cause respiratory failure, arguing that even if Dawn had been drowsy, she would have reacted to the increased temperature. Notably, crime scene photos showed newspapers under Dawn's body, a disturbing detail that was largely overlooked. A fire marshal became suspicious and spoke to the police, but he had no authority to decide whether Dawn's death was accidental. Nick was arrested on September 12, 2001, in the Kinko's parking lot. He adamantly denied any involvement in Dawn's death and claimed the church was trying to frame him. Despite his claims that church members could cause serious harm, Nick was charged with first-degree murder and his bail was set at $750,000. Sandy's account, when relayed to the police, added to the frustration over the nearly 4-year delay in considering Nick a suspect or making an arrest, and her reason for cooperating, stemming from anger over Nick's relationships with other women in the church. Church members reported Nick's strange behavior and inappropriate relationships when questioned. They were also upset that he did not buy a tombstone for Dawn after receiving the life insurance payout. On September 17, 2001, Nick pleaded not guilty in court. He claimed that the church had cursed him and that Pastor Robert had a dark influence beyond the understanding of the police. When Nick's trial began, Nick Hatcheny was charged with aggravated first-degree murder, which carries a sentence of life in prison without parole. Witnesses, including women who were involved with Nick and church members who had been counseled by him, shared their testimonies with the jury. These testimonies showed the major impact the church had on their lives, including experiences of visions and messages supposedly from God. Nick used these to control and manipulate them. P.B. Smith's daughter also testified, sharing how she met Nick through her father when she was a teenager. Nick seduced her, and they had sex after Dawn's death. This continued until she moved away about a year later. Doctors and forensic experts also testified, emphasizing that Dawn's body held important clues regarding her death. However, these indicators were ignored, as mentioned earlier, because Nick was a pastor. However, on December 26, 2002, 5 years after Dawn's tragic death, the jury deliberated for a day before returning a guilty verdict on first-degree murder against Nick Hatcheny. At his sentencing hearing on February 7, 2003, Nick addressed the court, which was filled with Dawn's loved ones. He continued to maintain his innocence, but also expressed remorse for his actions and sadness for his family's loss, saying that Dawn deserved better treatment. He was sentenced to life in prison. However, in 2007, an appeal to the state Supreme Court resulted in his life sentence being modified. The appeal argued that, because Dawn died as a result of Nick strangling her, the original charge of aggravated first-degree murder in connection with her death by arson did not match her actual cause of death. The defense argued that Nick therefore did not deserve a life sentence. Ultimately, the state Supreme Court ruled in favor of the appeal, changing Nick's sentence to 26 years in prison. While in prison, Nick was involved in many positive initiatives. He co-founded the Environmental Progress Reentry Network and introduced a waste management system that used vermicompost. Nick could be released from prison soon, as he is eligible for parole in 2025. Sadly, Dawn's life took a tragic turn. She thought she had found the right person, but the reality was very different. This led to a devastating betrayal and her heartbreaking death. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Mitzi Sanchez. Mitzi Sanchez was born on August 10, 1992 in Vallejo, California. She grew up in a loving family with 2 brothers and an older sister. As a child, Mitzi was very cheerful and energetic. She loved playing outdoors with her friends and spending time with her siblings. Mitzi was independent from a young age. When she started elementary school, her parents let her walk to school with her brother and they did not need an adult to accompany them. Fortunately, the school was close to their home and most of the way to school was on busy roads, making it safer for them to get to school. August 10, 2000 was Mitzi's 8th birthday and her family prepared a party to celebrate this special day. However, her school did not allow students to miss school on their birthdays. When Mitzi asked her mother if she could miss school on her birthday, her mother refused. Mitzi was very upset about this, and around 7:30 a.m., she left home with her brother. After school, Mitzi had to wait for her brother so they could walk home together. However, when her brother got out of school, he couldn't find his sister anywhere. Thinking that his sister had walked home by herself, he went home alone, but it turned out that Mitzi wasn't home. Mitzi's older sister was home at the time, and she noticed that her younger sister Mitzi hadn't come home yet, which seemed unusual, especially since it was Mitzi's birthday today and she was really looking forward to her birthday party. She waited for a while, hoping that Mitzi would eventually show up. At 4 p.m., her older sister became worried and called their mother to inform her of Mitzi's absence. Their mother quickly contacted Mitzi's school and found out that Mitzi had attended all of her classes that day. The mother then contacted other family members and friends of Mitzi, but no one had seen Mitzi since she left school. Mitzi's relatives became concerned and began searching for her. Family, friends, and neighbors joined in the effort, quickly organizing a large-scale search campaign. Some volunteers walked the streets, while others canvassed the neighborhood, going door to door along the route from Mitzi's home to her school, asking if anyone had seen her. Flyers with information about the girl were also printed and distributed. However, despite these extensive efforts, no one had any news of Mitzi, prompting her parents to contact the 911 emergency services. The police immediately joined the search for Mitzi and local media began reporting on the case the same day Mitzi went missing. The case has attracted widespread attention because similar incidents have occurred in their town before, raising concerns in the community. In fact, for years, an unknown perpetrator or perpetrators have been abducting children in Vallejo. The most recent case, before Mitzi's disappearance, occurred in December 1999. 7-year-old Xana Fairchild, who lived near Mitzi's home, disappeared on her way to school and, despite the efforts of the police and FBI, was never found. When Mitzi disappeared on her way home from school, police immediately suspected a connection to the unsolved case of Xana, who had disappeared under similar circumstances. Although the cases had striking similarities, the lack of leads hampered the investigation. Police revisited the initial list of suspects in Xana's case, but nothing came up. News of Mitzi's disappearance spread quickly, making headlines across the state. Fears of a serial kidnapper on the loose gripped the community, and the possibility of another victim was a terrifying prospect. Mitzi's family members gave numerous interviews in an attempt to keep the case alive and potentially gather more information. Her mother desperately called out to her kidnapper, pleading for her safe return. Police received numerous tips from the public, but unfortunately, none of them led to any breakthroughs in the case. However, everything changed 24 hours after Mitzi went missing, when something unexpected happened. A man contacted the police, telling them that he had discovered bloody rags in a dumpster. Upon examination, experts determined that the rags were actually bed sheets from a Vallejo hotel. This discovery led the police to the hotel to search for evidence and potential clues. Although they could not confirm whether Mitzi had stayed at the hotel, the bed sheets were sent to a lab for analysis, which would take several days to process. In addition to waiting for the test results, the police searched the dumpster, looking for any other clues, but found nothing. The next day, August 12th, the police received another call that changed the course of the case. At approximately 11 a.m., a man reported that he was driving through an industrial area in Santa Clara, when a young girl ran up to his truck, screaming that someone was chasing her. The girl then climbed into the cab of the truck and the driver saw a man running toward them. The girl screamed that he had kidnapped her and wanted to kill her. As soon as she got into the truck, the perpetrator turned around, got back in the car, and drove away. The driver then contacted the police and gave them the girl's name, Mitzi Sanchez. The officers immediately picked her up and took her to the hospital for evaluation. While at the hospital, Mitzi was able to speak to her mother on the phone. Shortly thereafter, her relatives arrived at the hospital and reunited with Mitzi. Meanwhile, the police spoke with the truck driver. He provided the kidnapper's license plate number, because it had driven right in front of his truck. Luckily, if he hadn't been there, the perpetrator might have caught up with the girl. The police ran the license plate and identified the car as belonging to a 39-year-old man named Curtis Dean Anderson. Curtis had a criminal record, including theft, kidnapping, and suspicion of other crimes. As the police focused their efforts on finding the kidnapper, their colleagues were ready to listen to Mitzi's account of what had happened to her. Mitzi explained that on August 10th, she was excited to go home after her last day of school to celebrate her birthday with her family. Instead of waiting for her brother, Mitzi decided to go alone. As she was walking home, she saw a car parked on the side of the road a few hundred yards away and noticed the driver watching her intently in the rearview mirror. Mitzi felt uncomfortable with him but quickly brushed it off. It was daytime, she was on a familiar street, and being young, she did not fully understand the potential danger posed by strangers. As Mitzi approached the car, the man got out and asked her to help him. He said he needed to get a roll of tape from under the car seat and explained that he could not bend down due to a leg injury from falling off his bike. Mitzi hesitated for a moment, initially hesitant, but her instinct to help others, passed down from her parents, eventually made her agree. As she reached into the car to get the tape, the man quickly pushed her into the car, covered her mouth to keep her from screaming, and slammed the door shut. Mitzi tried to scream, but it was too late. The kidnapper had driven off in an unknown direction, and she looked out the window in horror. At one point, they passed Mitzi's house and she saw relatives preparing to celebrate her birthday. Minutes later, the kidnapper pulled into a deserted parking lot. He gave Mitzi new clothes, told her to change, and threw her old clothes in a nearby trash can. He also warned her not to try to escape, claiming that he had a gun and that no one could escape him. Over the next few hours, the man drove Mitzi in an unknown direction. At one point, she asked why he kidnapped her, and he simply replied that he had been kidnapped as a child. As night fell, he parked the car and began covering the windows with some rags. He then restrained Mitzi by tying her legs with padlocks. The kidnapper pulled out a bottle of alcohol and forced Mitzi to take a few sips. Although she initially resisted, Mitzi eventually complied with his demands. The man then took out his camera and took several photos of Mitzi before she got in the car. Fearing for her safety, Mitzi tried to stay awake and keep an eye on the situation. Mitzi thought about escaping as she struggled to stay awake. She caught a glimpse of a police car driving past the parking lot, but it was too far away. Even if Mitzi screamed, the police never heard her. The next day, the kidnapper continued to drive her around town. To hide her from view, he made her sit on the floor of the car and covered her with a blanket. Finally, he stopped the car and got out for a few minutes. During this short time, Mitzi tried to get her feet out of the chains, but unfortunately, it was not possible. She also discovered a nail file and tried to use it to pick the lock, but her efforts were unsuccessful. When the kidnapper returned to the car and drove away, he said he had stopped at her parents' house. The kidnapper pretended to be a concerned citizen and asked to distribute flyers around town. Mitzi was shocked and overwhelmed. She was so close to home but still held captive. Over the course of several hours, the kidnapper stopped several times, getting in and out of the car. When it got dark, he drove to a remote area outside of town and parked. There, he committed a heinous crime, sexually assaulting Mitzi. The traumatic experience left Mitzi in a state of shock while the kidnapper fell asleep. The next morning, the perpetrator continued driving, stopping occasionally to buy cigarettes and alcohol. At one of these stops, as he returned to the car and leaned in, something fell out of his pocket. He warned Mitzi not to look, but she disobeyed and caught a glimpse of a large set of keys. Mitzi realized that one of these keys was capable of unlocking the lock on her bike chain. Despite her fear of retaliation from her kidnapper, Mitzi mustered up the courage to act. She took out the keys, selected the one that seemed to fit the lock best, and tried to unlock the chain. Surprisingly, it worked. Mitzi was free of the chain. Mitzi struggled to get out through the car window, but exhaustion left her barely able to move. She gathered all her strength, trying to lift herself up and jump out of the car. As she crawled around the car, she saw her captor, who had spotted her immediately. He yelled for her to come back, but Mitzi was determined to escape. Using the last of her strength, she ran in the opposite direction. The captor chased after her, while Mitzi waved desperately and shouted to the passing cars for help. Unfortunately, they all drove past without stopping. Mitzi continued to wave because she knew that if she stopped for even a moment, the captor would catch up and harm her. Finally, she spotted a truck, ran towards it, and jumped in front of it. The driver quickly stopped, and Mitzi climbed into the cab. She was in shock, dehydrated and hungry, but her life was no longer in danger. At the hospital, doctors gave Mitzi the help she needed and soon her entire family came to be with her. News of her miraculous rescue quickly spread, making headlines across the city. When Mitzi returned home, a large crowd of thousands had gathered on her street, cheering and celebrating her belated birthday. Meanwhile, the police were searching for the kidnapper Curtis Dean Anderson. When they showed his photo to Mitzi's mother, she realized that she had actually seen him twice. The first time was before Mitzi was kidnapped, when Curtis stood on the street and looked toward their house. The second time was the day after Mitzi went missing. Curtis came to her house and asked for flyers related to Mitzi's disappearance. The police continued to search for the suspect, Curtis, until late in the evening. They set up surveillance at all the locations he frequented, and he was finally arrested in a trailer park. He was arrested without incident. Curtis was then taken into custody pending trial. Police began investigating Curtis's possible links to other crimes. During the investigation, they learned that Mitzi was not his first victim. In fact, Curtis told Mitzi himself that she was not the first victim he had harmed and that no one had ever escaped him before. This statement led police to suspect that Curtis had committed crimes before Mitzi was kidnapped, despite his claims that none of his previous victims had survived. Curtis' actions suggested that he had experience committing such brutal crimes. It is worth noting that Curtis had been imprisoned for kidnapping a woman in 1991. He was released in November 1999. It was clear that Curtis intended to kill Mitzi. One specific detail that suggests the murder was planned occurred on the day of her escape. The police knew why Curtis stopped by the industrial park. Because he used to work there at one of the companies, and that day he visited his former co-workers. He asked them to give him a large bag, and the police immediately realized that he intended to use that bag to dump the body in. After Curtis was arrested, Mitzi struggled to recover for a long time. Her anxiety increased when the police suspected Curtis of being involved in Xana's kidnapping. Although Mitzi was relieved to be safe, she was still worried about the condition of her friend Xana Fairchild, 7, who had been missing for more than 8 months without any updates on her condition. Desperate to help find Xana, Mitzi joined a search effort, but unfortunately, no new leads were discovered. This continued until January 2001, when a human skull was found in the mountains near the city of Santa Cruz. Forensic analysis confirmed that the skull was that of Xana, and she was officially declared dead. This news devastated Mitzi. When the trial began in April 2001, Mitzi was required to testify about her experiences in front of a crowded courtroom. During her testimony, she had to provide every detail of what Curtis had done to her. Despite Curtis being present in the courtroom, Mitzi was still able to tell her story courageously. As a result, Curtis was sentenced to 251 years in prison, but his story did not end there. While in prison, detectives frequently questioned Curtis about his possible involvement in other crimes. A breakthrough came when an inmate reported that Curtis had confided in him about the kidnapping and murder of 8 girls. Although the inmate cooperated with police, sharing details of Curtis's story, he did not reveal all of his secrets. He did not deny the information he had confided in him, but instead attempted to negotiate benefits in exchange for speaking with police. Curtis eventually admitted to the murders of Xana Fairchild and at least 13 other girls and women. It was not until 2005 that he confessed fully to Xana's murder, for which he received an additional 50-year sentence. Mitzi's struggles did not stop after Curtis's trial. She faced a new challenge when she returned to school just weeks after her rescue. Her classmates bullied and taunted her, calling her the kidnapped girl and saying that she should have died instead of being saved. These cruel comments made her school years a burden, and eventually, she could no longer bear the pressure. Mitzi became increasingly dependent on alcohol to cope with the stress. And she felt desperate to return to normal life. However, her life took a drastic turn after a serious car accident at a party, in which she broke her neck and arm. She was in a coma for 2 weeks. When she woke up, doctors informed her that she was pregnant and would give birth to a baby girl. This news turned her life upside down, and Mitzi found the strength to change her life for the better. Curtis died of illness in 2007, 6 years after his conviction.
Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Michelle Leng. In 2018, 20-year-old Michelle Leng departed from a major airport in northern Sichuan province, China, during a heavy rainstorm. She tearfully bid farewell to her mother, who had become her closest confidant since her father's passing in 2008. Michelle embarked on her journey to Australia, a country she had long dreamed of studying in since childhood. After an 11-hour flight, Michelle arrived in Sydney. Although it was her first time traveling such a great distance alone, her determination to pursue her dream helped her overcome any challenges she faced. Upon landing, she was greeted by her aunt and her cousin, who was just 2 years younger than Michelle. She lived happily with her 48-year-old aunt, her aunt's young husband Derek Barrett, and her cousin in their house. Michelle had her own room where she spent most of her free time reading and drawing, which were her favorite hobbies. Michelle was a bright and ambitious student who pursued economics and hospitality management at the University of Technology in Sydney. She was outgoing, adaptable, and easily made new friends. Like many young women her age, Michelle enjoyed sharing her social life on social media, posting pictures of herself enjoying cocktails with friends and engaging in adventurous activities. Michelle had a passion for exploration and was always ready for new experiences. She frequently traveled around New South Wales on day trips and even ventured as far as Hobart for vacations. Her adventurous spirit was evident in her recent social media posts, which included videos from West Head Lookout near Sydney Harbour, photos from Resolute Beach in Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park north of the city, and images from Berry Beach on the south coast. On June 13, 2013, Michelle went to Snapper Point where she bravely took a photo of herself on the edge of a cliff. She then shared this ominous photo on her Instagram account. Michelle was excelling in her studies, making new friends, and had found a part-time job. Eager to organize her personal life, she regularly communicated with men on dating sites and went on trial dates. She led an active and busy life. She attended her classes during the day, then rushed to work. On weekends, she made sure to meet up with her friends and visit places. On April 21, 2016, Michelle spent the day with a friend at the mall, having lunch and shopping. Later, she took a train and was last seen getting off at Central Station around 4:30 p.m. She disappeared after that. 2 days later, Derek went to the train station to pick up his wife, who was returning from a business trip. Derek's aunt asked him about Michelle, and he informed her that he hadn't seen Michelle in 2 days. Derek, who had been jobless for a while, had a habit of staying up late on his computer and sleeping until the afternoon. Although it was possible he hadn't seen Michelle, the situation was concerning because no one had heard from her since April 22, and her phone was turned off. Michelle's aunt grew increasingly worried after calling all of Michelle's friends and acquaintances. Upon inspecting Michelle's room, everything appeared to be in its usual perfect order. After examining Michelle's laptop, the family concluded that she hadn't returned from her date, and they feared something might have happened to her. Michelle's disappearance was particularly alarming because she typically maintained daily contact with friends and family members living in China and Australia. On the day following Michelle's disappearance, her aunt and uncle Derek reported her missing to the police and informed the Chinese embassy. On April 24, 2016, tourists discovered a woman's body in a plastic bag at Snapper Point. While Michelle's relatives in both China and Australia were searching for her, local news channels reported the discovery of the unidentified body. When a sketch of the victim was released, it became clear that the body was Michelle's. Police took 3 days to officially identify her using the sketch. Subsequently, Michelle's case was officially classified as a missing person, and an investigation began. After interviewing close relatives who lived with Michelle, the initial theory was that she had been attacked by a stranger she had planned to meet that day. Security cameras recorded her movements on the day of her disappearance. In the footage and during a short train ride, Michelle was alone. According to her friends, she had no plans to meet anyone that day and was in a hurry to get home. The analysis of her social media accounts and correspondence did not confirm the existence of a young man she might have arranged to meet. Thus, the theory about a mysterious stranger who could have committed the crime was not confirmed. The autopsy confirmed that Michelle's body had multiple injuries, indicating she likely tried to defend herself from her attacker, suffering several stab wounds. Police Chief Inspector Gary Jubin stated that the evidence suggests Michelle was brutally assaulted before her death. She was last seen on her way home and didn't deviate to any other location, which raises questions about who could have attacked her so violently. The inspector also noted that the perpetrator probably deliberately chose a very isolated area in an otherwise beautiful place. The body was found in an area frequented by tourists and fishermen, but at a specific spot that was quite secluded. Forensic analysis revealed that Michelle's body had been in the water for less than 48 hours, possibly much less. The police chief inspector noted that while the body was found far from the national park entrance, a nearby parking lot made it possible for someone to transport the body by car. Homicide detectives examined CCTV footage and traffic cameras to trace Michelle's final movements. They also interviewed family members, friends, and co-workers to gather more information, aiming to reconstruct the events leading up to her death and understand the family dynamics in Michelle's household. Inspector Gary stressed that based on all gathered information, Michelle was known to be very responsible and consistently communicated her whereabouts to her family. Her sudden disappearance raised significant concerns for her well-being. Surprisingly, for 2 days, her family either didn't realize she was missing or chose to ignore it. As Derek was the last person known to have seen Michelle alive, police brought him in for questioning. Investigators found his stories about nighttime activities and extended daytime sleeping suspicious, leading them to conduct follow-up interviews. During these, they probed into his relationship with Michelle and asked him to recall their last encounter in detail. Derek, overwhelmed by the intense questioning, stopped answering and requested legal representation. His unusual behavior raised suspicions, leading to his arrest as a suspect. The arrest was explained by 2 key pieces of evidence. First, investigators discovered that Derek's cell phone signal placed him in the vicinity where Michelle's body was found on April 24th. Second, police obtained surveillance footage from a nearby parking lot, showing a car matching Derek's vehicle in the early morning hours of that same day. These findings strongly suggested Derek's presence at the crime scene, leaving little doubt about his involvement. Derek denied the accusations and claimed that his presence in the parking lot was a mere coincidence, insisting that the car wasn't his. However, the surveillance footage was clear enough to prove he was there. The police charged him for the death of 25-year-old Michelle, whose naked body with multiple stab wounds was found in a blowhole on the central coast of New South Wales. The news of Derek's arrest and the charges against him shocked Michelle's entire family. The police spoke with Michelle's mother, who was devastated by her daughter's death and rushed to Sydney to see the place where her only daughter's dreams and life came to an end. She still couldn't come to terms with her passing. Derek Barrett, a 27-year-old man married to Michelle's aunt, was charged with the murder of the 25-year-old student. Police released CCTV footage showing Michelle's final movements on April 21st in Sydney's central business district. The video captured her shopping at Pitt Street Mall and then taking a train from St James Station to Casula in Sydney's southwest. Investigators believe Michelle returned to her family home in Casula that afternoon, where she lived with her uncle, aunt, and cousin. It is presumed that she was murdered in her home. CCTV footage reportedly showed a vehicle entering Lake Munmora National Park around 7 a.m. on April 24th. Police believe Michelle's body was in this vehicle. Although Derek was arrested and charged initially, the investigation continued. As more information about Michelle's final moments came to light, additional charges were filed against Derek. These included 5 counts of indecent assault, 2 counts of installing a filming device, and murder. The investigation also uncovered that the suspect had an inappropriate sexual interest in his wife's young niece. Analysis of Derek's cell phone revealed crucial evidence. Deleted files were recovered that demonstrated his involvement in Michelle's death and his unhealthy obsession with her. It was discovered that Derek had installed a hidden camera in the shared bathroom and regularly reviewed the recordings. The phone also contained images taken shortly before Michelle's death. Records showed that Michelle arrived home on April 21st around 5 p.m. Her last text message was sent close to midnight, and she was not heard from again after that. During the night, Derek carried out his wicked plan. He entered Michelle's room while she was sleeping to record her, as he had done before, but this time she woke up and he attacked her. He tied her up and covered her mouth with duct tape to silence her. Derek kept Michelle tied to the bed for 2 days, periodically abusing her. Investigators found photos on Derek's phone showing Michelle naked and bound, with an expression of terror. These images didn't show the injuries that eventually caused her death. The last photo was taken around 8 a.m. on April 23rd, when Michelle was still alive. On April 23rd, Derek's stepson came home twice, not hearing Michelle's quiet moans. Derek was taking a shower at the time. Security cameras recorded Derek leaving the apartment 4 times to take out the trash. Michelle was likely already dead by then, and after showering and washing off the blood, Derek thoroughly cleaned the house, hiding any evidence of the crime and Michelle's disappearance. On April 24th at 7 a.m., Derek drove to Snapper Point. On the way, he stopped at a gas station where he bought drinks and filled up his car. He was captured there by security cameras. Upon arriving at Snapper Point around 9 a.m., he disposed of Michelle's body and took some photographs of the area. Afterwards, Derek visited his parents, who didn't notice anything unusual in his behavior. He then returned home to wait for his wife's return. With complete calmness, he reported several times that he hadn't seen Michelle and that she hadn't come home. Cynically, he accompanied his wife to the police station to file a missing person report. The Derek judicial hearing was held on June 29, 2016. Bill Whitby, Derek's lawyer, informed the local Bowood court that his client pleaded not guilty and was as shocked and grief-stricken by Michelle's death as the rest of the family. Michelle's friends and family filled the courtroom, but Derek didn't need to be present. He later appeared via video conference. A day before the hearing, the accused had stated that he didn't remember much about the hours leading up to Michelle's murder due to his use of illegal drugs. He also informed the court that he only had vague memories of the 2-hour trip to Snapper Point, where he threw Michelle's body off the cliff. Before the court hearing, Derek underwent a psychological evaluation. However, forensic psychologist Dr. Richard challenged Derek's claims of memory loss. Dr. Richard testified that Derek was mentally fit to receive the full sentence for his actions. He explained that the drugs Derek had been taking were not known to cause memory loss. Dr. Richard argued that all of Derek's actions, from the murder to the disposal of the body, were deliberate and purposeful. He also reported that Derek's IQ, concentration, and memory were within normal ranges. Furthermore, Dr. Richard dismissed Derek's claims of memory loss, stating that the high number of stab wounds suggested sadistic tendencies rather than emotional outbursts or memory lapses. This expert testimony significantly undermined Derek's defense. The psychologist also rejected Derek's claim that he had no sexual attraction towards the victim. Derek tied up, gagged, and stabbed the young girl 30 times, but he claimed to have no memory of these acts. Dr. Richard also told the court that the accused was faking amnesia to lessen his responsibility for the crime, after claiming not to remember the period during which he had apprehended and killed Michelle. During the trial, Derek tried to explain his crime by claiming to be addicted to illegal drugs. However, this claim was also questioned by the doctor. Richard pointed out that Derek's statement was contradictory, as it was obvious that Derek had gained weight during this period. Judge Wilson stated that in his 30 years as a criminal defense lawyer, he had never seen an obese person addicted to substances. During a court hearing in Sydney, Derek's demeanor exhibited characteristics often associated with psychopathy. His crime was not attributed to intoxication, poor decision-making, or a history of abuse. At a retrial in August, Derek admitted to murdering and kidnapping Michelle, as well as secretly entering her room on 2 occasions while she slept to make videos. He also confessed to taking 19 explicit photographs of Michelle shortly before her death. Derek claimed he had no recollection of the 48-hour period surrounding the murder, including cleaning the crime scene and disposing of the body, due to being under the influence of illegal substances. He stated that his only memories were of an argument, blood in the bathroom, and his niece's terrified face as she screamed at him. Judge Wilson dismissed Derek's claims of memory loss and lack of remorse as insincere. The Michelle family comforted each other while Derek tearfully insisted he deserved to live and expressed regret for his actions. Judge Wilson described the crime as depraved and brutal, carried out by a trusted relative. As the judge recounted Derek's fantasies and actions, he stared at the floor, no longer reveling in the attention. It was clear his attempts to deceive had failed. Despite claiming drug-induced memory lapses, the events were likely vivid in his mind. Throughout the court proceedings, Derek remained stoic, repeatedly uttering his victim's name. In his statement to the court, Chief Inspector Gary Jubilant from the NSW Police Homicide Unit described the crime as horrific and senseless. He expressed satisfaction that justice was served but emphasized that there was no happiness in such a case. Judge Wilson handed down a sentence of 34 years and 6 months to 28-year-old Derek Barrett, with a maximum term of 46 years. Barrett will be eligible for parole in 2050. He remained emotionless as the sentence was delivered. Michelle Lynn's mother expressed her gratitude to both the Australian and Chinese communities for their support during this difficult time of grief. She specifically acknowledged the efforts of the NSW police, particularly Detective Inspector Gary Jubilant from the Homicide Squad, for their work in investigating her daughter's death. To assist with funeral expenses and provide financial support for Mrs. Leng when she returns to China, a fund has been established. Michelle's tragic story took an unexpected turn 4 years after her death. During a routine visit to her elderly mother, a woman made a shocking discovery. She found her mother holding an unfamiliar USB drive in the kitchen. Curious about its contents, the daughter plugged the device into her computer. To her horror, she found it contained disturbing videos and photos of a sexual nature. Alarmed, she immediately contacted the police. Upon investigation, authorities discovered that the USB drive held 9 video files totaling over an hour in length, as well as 13 photo files. These files documented the abuse Michelle endured shortly before her murder on April 23, 2016, providing crucial evidence in the case. The woman had no apparent connection to Derek and lived about 6 kilometers from his former home. The origin of the USB device and how it ended up in the woman's family home is unknown. The police were able to link the photos found on the USB to those Derek had deleted from his phone before his arrest, in an attempt to hide his crimes. In 2020, Derek was charged with several sexual offenses after videos of him abusing Michelle were discovered on the USB device in November 2019. However, the police and prosecutors admitted they had hit a dead end regarding the discovery of the device, which led to the new charges. The prosecutor Hugh Baker informed the court that the elderly woman with dementia was confined to her home and only went out to the yard. There's no explanation for how the USB ended up in the woman's possession at the residence in Strathfield, Hugh told the court. Based on new facts and evidence, Derek's sentence was extended without the possibility of parole after images accidentally found revealed the full extent of his abuse against Michelle before murdering her. This horrible and depraved secret, discovered by chance in the hands of an elderly woman in a leafy Sydney suburb, resulted in additional years of well-deserved punishment for the convicted criminal, on top of his already lengthy sentence. The tragic case of Michelle Leng serves as a haunting reminder of the dangers that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives. Michelle, a vibrant young woman with dreams of a bright future, fell victim to a betrayal from within her own family. The harrowing details of her story reveal the depths of human depravity and the complexities of trust and betrayal. As justice was ultimately served, it leaves a lingering sense of sorrow for the life cut short and a call to honor Michelle's memory by remaining vigilant against such heinous acts in our communities.
Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ilona Flint. On December 23, 2013, 22-year-old Ilona Flint finished her shift at a shopping center store where she often worked late during the Christmas season. This night, she left work just after midnight, expecting her boyfriend to pick her up from the parking lot. However, he did not arrive and did not respond to her messages. Concerned, she reached out to her boyfriend's brother, whom she got along with well, and asked him for a ride home. He agreed to help her, but unfortunately, they never made it home. On that fateful night, a dangerous criminal chose to practice his murderous skills by targeting the Belvedere family. This decision led to a terrible tragedy. The Belvedere family was well respected and had a reputation for being good, honest, and crime-free. Ilona had just moved to San Diego, California, where she was lively, energetic, and determined. Love had blossomed between her and Gianni Belvedere, and they had announced their engagement shortly before the tragedy. They loved each other and were eager to start a family together. Gianni's parents had become very close to Ilona. They treated her like their own daughter, and they had a wonderful relationship from the very beginning. All of this contributed to their belief in a bright future for the couple. Not even their brightest dreams could protect them from the violent criminals of 2013. A shooting broke out in the parking lot of the Minville Shopping Center in San Diego. One of the store employees noticed a suspicious person and called the police. Before that, Ilona Flint frantically dialed 911, telling the dispatcher that a stranger was threatening her. The driver of the car she was in was her boyfriend's 2-year-old brother, Salvatore Belvedere. Suddenly, the call with Ilona was interrupted. The dispatcher sent patrol officers to the area to investigate. In just a few minutes, the patrol arrived at the incident scene. Inside the car, they found Ilona and Salvatore unconscious. Ilona was slumped in the front passenger seat, and police identified 2 gunshot wounds on her body, one in her chest and another in the back of her head, which was fatal. Despite brief tries to revive her, it became evident that Ilona would not wake up. Doctors later confirmed her death, noting that the assailant had shot both her and the driver while Ilona was on the phone. During the call with the dispatcher, no background noise or gunshots were heard. Police reviewed the call recording and interviewed the witness who reported the incident. She also did not hear any loud noises. As a result, police believe the attacker used a pistol with a silencer. The investigation confirmed that the assassin had a .22 caliber pistol. The boy, Salvatore, was in critical condition after being shot in the face, right between the eyes. When police arrived, he was still alive and was rushed to the hospital. Despite the doctor's efforts to save him, he fell into a coma and died 2 days later. This left the police without any valuable information from him. Forensic experts started by examining the vehicle where the Ilona and Salvatore were shot. Sadly, they found no evidence of a third person either inside or outside the car. They discovered that the vehicle in which Ilona and Salvatore were found belonged to Leonardo Belvedere, Salvatore's father. Police intended to inform the car owner about the tragic incident and also wanted to speak with Gianni, Ilona's new fiancé. However, they could not find Gianni at his home. Leonardo went to the shopping mall where the incident occurred and waited for news of Gianni. Leonardo was the first to notice that something was wrong. Gianni usually arrived at the mall early and waited for Ilona in the parking lot, so his absence caused concern. Leonardo tried to call him, but Gianni did not answer any calls or messages, which was completely unlike him. This unusual behavior prompted Leonardo to go looking for his son. The police issued a notice for Gianni in his green Toyota Camry. There was suspicion that Gianni was involved in the murder of Ilona and her brother Salvatore, possibly due to a conflict between young people that led to the tragedy. The search for Gianni in his car began throughout the city, as the police had a number of questions for him. They needed to determine if his girlfriend Ilona had any disputes with anyone that could have endangered her life. And they also needed to confirm his alibi. To get those answers, the police had to speak directly with Gianni. The first clue had emerged. Police had received information from dispatchers that could lead to a suspect. Police learned that shortly after Ilona contacted emergency services, a mall employee had called to report seeing a suspicious vehicle with an unknown man standing next to it. The man, who appeared to be of average height, was standing behind the driver's side window of the one vehicle. Although the witness did not hear any gunshots, screams, or signs of a struggle, she found the man's behavior unusual. He made some strange gestures before quickly returning to his car. Fortunately, the witness had taken a good look at the vehicle and provided police with a detailed description. The vehicle was very similar to the one Gianni had been driving when he went missing. At this point, police began to consider Ilona's fiancé, Gianni, as a prime suspect, as he was likely present at the crime scene. Police obtained surveillance footage, which further strengthened their belief in the reliability of an eyewitness account of the shooter. Based on the recordings, they created a description to help identify the suspect, a man of unknown race, of average height, wearing brown pants and a shirt with some resemblance to Gianni. This raised concerns for police, as it suggested a possible love triangle. Police speculated that Gianni had discovered Ilona and Salvatore's affair. It is believed that Gianni may have encountered them in the parking lot of a shopping mall. In a fit of rage, he is believed to have shot both of them with a pistol equipped with a silencer before fleeing the scene. While this scenario is common in love triangles, it remains a theory that needs to be confirmed. Friends of the couple have dismissed the police theories, insisting that Ilona had nothing to do with Salvatore. They believe that she was deeply in love with Gianni and that both young people were victims of an attack by an unknown assailant, while Gianni had nothing to do with the crime. There is even the possibility that he was kidnapped. Even with this testimony, the police still did not rule out Gianni as a suspect. The police returned to speak with Leonardo, the father of the Belvedere family. The police informed Leonardo that Gianni was considered one of the prime suspects in the case. However, for Gianni's family and friends, this was hard to believe. They could not imagine him being involved in any kind of heinous act. Gianni had always been a well-mannered and calm person. He did not associate with troublemakers. He was known for his intelligence, optimism, and ambitious plans for the future, including with his beloved Ilona. The idea that he could have resorted to violence against his own brother and fiancé seemed completely absurd. While the police searched for Gianni, his family reached out to him through the media, believing there had been a misunderstanding and that he would return home soon. Despite suspicions surrounding him, his mother and sister encouraged him to come back to clear his name. They also appealed to anyone who might have information about Gianni's whereabouts. Unfortunately, they received no significant leads. Police explored the possibility that someone else might be involved in the murders of the two young victims, yet they felt it was important to keep an eye on Gianni for any possible threats. They also looked into the involvement of organized crime, considering whether the victims might have been gang members or had connections to drug activities and deaths. However, there was no evidence linking them to illegal substances or criminal activity. Toxicology reports showed no traces of alcohol or drugs in their body. and neither had a criminal record or enemies who wanted to harm them. The crime appeared to be planned specifically targeting Ilona and Salvatore. The perpetrator acted with determination and confidence, leading police to dismiss the idea that the victims were simply random targets of a violent attack. Despite this, none of Gianni's acquaintances believed he could have carried out such a brutal crime. Nevertheless, police remained convinced that the incidents were closely tied to him and found his disappearance highly suspicious. Police decided to investigate the Gianni's mobile phone history. They found that his phone had been turned off at 11:45 p.m. on the night of the double murder and had not been turned back on since. Gianni's last call was to his cousin. The police contacted this relative to gather more information about their conversation that evening. The cousin confirmed that Gianni had called him but mentioned that nothing unusual was discussed. They casually chatted and Gianni simply mentioned he was going to the mall to pick up Ilona, as he usually did. That concluded their conversation. Ilona did not enjoy driving, despite having a driver's license, so Gianni always picked her up after work. Police were able to access Ilona's cell phone records, who was found dead in the mall parking lot. They discovered that shortly before her death, she had sent several text messages to Gianni, but he had ignored them. Ilona attempted to contact him after 2:45 p.m. but no one answered. She then called Gianni's brother Salvatore, asking him to pick her up from the parking lot. Salvatore agreed and drove to her location. It was revealed that they had been in a car in the parking lot from midnight to 1 a.m. Ilona was very worried about Gianni, prompting her to call friends, acquaintances, the local hospital, and the morgue to find him. This behavior was unusual for her, suggesting that she was increasingly worried that he might have had an accident on the way to the mall. On January 17, 2014, the police received an important tip in the case. A witness reported seeing a suspicious car parked near her home for an extended period. The abandoned vehicle was identified as Gianni's Toyota Camry, located in a remote area of Riverside, San Diego. The police were alarmed by a foul odor coming from the car, which piqued their interest. They quickly arrived at the scene and checked the car's license plates against their database, discovering that the plates were fake. Upon further investigation, they found out that the car belonged to the missing person, Gianni. Officers entered the car and noticed blood on the passenger seat, which was a concerning sign. While inspecting the vehicle, they also detected a strong odor of decomposition, particularly near the trunk. The police recognized this smell, indicating that a body was nearby. Unfortunately, they discovered the body of a person, believed to be Gianni, in an advanced state of decomposition. Due to the hot weather, dental records were needed for identification. A forensic expert confirmed the police suspicions. It was indeed Gianni. After the identification, the victim's family was informed of the tragic news. They were devastated, as they had held on to hope that their son would be safe. The police were faced with a serious situation. Who would want to harm these young individuals? A forensic examination revealed that Gianni had been dead for approximately 3 weeks before he was discovered. A bullet was found in his skull, which was the cause of Gianni's death. Based on the position of the body and the nature of the wounds, it appeared that the shooter was on his side when the shot was fired. The bullet entered behind Gianni's left ear, causing fatal injuries. He died of blood loss. Police analyzed the bullet that killed Gianni and matched it to the bullets that killed Salvatore and Ilona. Ballistics tests confirmed that all the bullets were fired from the same type of weapon. It is possible that all the victims were killed by the same person. Could it have been an accident? A deliberate crime resulted in the deaths of the young people. But the theory of a love triangle was eventually ruled out. The police decided to start their investigation from scratch. In the trunk of Gianni's car, forensic experts discovered several empty air freshener cans. These had been left behind by the attacker, after repinning the buttons. This may have been an attempt to hide the smell of decomposition from the car for as long as possible. Although experts were unable to collect DNA samples from the suspect to identify the killer, they noted that the buttons on the air freshener cans had been secured with pieces of tape. After a thorough examination, the police discovered tiny traces of DNA on one of the tapes, hoping to gather clues about the mysterious killer. They entered this information into a database, but unfortunately, there were no matches. This suggests that the killer likely does not have a criminal record. However, this process was still valuable, as the system would automatically notify them if a matching DNA sample was ever added to the database. Despite this setback with the DNA, the case took a new turn soon after. Less than a day after Gianni's body was found, on January 18th, another incident occurred that initially appeared unrelated. During the investigation of the triple murder, police officers uncovered important clues. About an hour's drive from San Diego, security officers in San Clemente stopped a man at a checkpoint. He appeared nervous and suspicious during the inspection of his car, which revealed a large cache of weapons in the trunk. This included an AR-15 assault rifle, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, a .45 caliber pistol, and a .22 caliber pistol equipped with a rifled barrel and a homemade silencer. The man, heavily armed, was identified as Carlo Mercado, who was 29 years old at the time of his arrest. The police database indicated that Carlo legally owned 2 firearms. He did not have any previous convictions, and he was not listed as a potential threat in law enforcement records. As a result, he was released immediately, and his guns were confiscated. However, officers later discovered he also had an illegal pistol of that caliber. Given the presence of a homemade silencer, this illegal pistol might have been the weapon used in the triple murder. The police spent 4 months collecting evidence and preparing charges while waiting for the investigation to conclude. Special agents took charge of examining the confiscated weapons, focusing on the illegal distribution of firearms. Carlo had already admitted guilt for the illegal use of weapons after police offered him a plea deal. This deal was essential for them to formally request DNA samples from the Carlo. Once he agreed, the samples were collected and checked against the police database. This led to a match with DNA taken from the Scotch tape found in Gianni's car, which had previously been uploaded to the database. A ballistic examination of Carlo's pistol confirmed that it was the weapon used to shoot all 3 young victims. To further establish his connection to the crime, police analyzed geolocation data from Carlo's mobile phone. This analysis showed that he was near the shopping center at the time of the shooting. His motorcycle had broken down, which made it difficult for the police to find him initially, as he did not appear in most of the security camera footage. However, some footage did capture the motorcycle he used to get to the parking lot, where he was seen standing next to it. When Carlo spotted Gianni's car while he was waiting for her Alona, Carlo saw it as a perfect chance to steal a vehicle. He attempted to threaten Gianni into handing over the car keys, but Gianni fought back. Gianni was unaware of Carlo's dangerous obsession with weapons. He fancied himself a killer and had long fantasized about using a gun. The police later discovered evidence of this obsession during their investigation. Carlo frequently searched the internet for information about weapons, often focusing on gun-related murders, including mass school shootings. His bizarre fantasies prompted him to act. He approached Gianni's car and, in one swift motion, pulled out a .22 caliber pistol. He shot Gianni at close range, then climbed into the car and pushed him into the passenger seat. Excited by the act of acting out his violent fantasy, he drove around the parking lot in Gianni's car before leaving the scene of the crime. Carlo drove to the nearest gas station, as confirmed by the geolocation on his phone. He then decided to go back to get his motorbike, which he had left in a parking lot. On the way back, he crashed into a car carrying Salvatore and Alona. They recognized it as Gianni's car, and Ilona was excited to see her lover's car. She signaled Salvatore to come closer, but this turned out to be a grave mistake. When she realized that the driver was not her boyfriend, it was too late. Ilona panicked and tried to call emergency services, but was unable to finish the call because a bullet had hit her car. Carlo shot Ilona and Salvatore, the brother of the first victim. After killing them, he drove to a gas station and filled up Gianni's car, while the owner was still inside, having bled to death from a gunshot wound. The next morning, Carlo began looking into a murder that had occurred on Christmas Eve. Police later discovered Carlo's fingerprints on the gas cap of Gianni's car. Their efforts to collect and analyze evidence paid off. As a result, in April 2014, Carlo Mercado was arrested and charged with 3 counts of murder. Initially, Carlo maintained his innocence. He denied using a weapon against the victims, arguing that he did not know them and had no involvement in the murders. However, the prosecution continued to analyze the evidence, building a case that would ensure the criminal would be imprisoned for life. In June 2014, the trial began, with the prosecution arguing that the attack stemmed from a desire to steal Gianni's car. The prosecution claimed that Gianni had gone to the mall to meet Ilona and was waiting for her in the parking lot. While there, Gianni confronted Carlo, who had also come to the mall. In a fit of rage, Carlo used an unregistered pistol equipped with a silencer. After firing the shots, he fled in Gianni's car. Security cameras recorded the incident and Carlo realized that the police would be looking for the car. To avoid arrest, he changed the car's original license plate to a fake one, filled it with gas, and then returned to the mall to retrieve his motorcycle. Carlo returned to retrieve the motorcycle because he believed it might attract the attention of the police. At that time, Ilona and Salvatore saw Gianni's car while they were trying to find out what happened to Ilona's boyfriend. Instead of running away, Carlo chose to eliminate all witnesses. He used a pistol with a silencer to kill Ilona and Salvatore. The prosecutor's office believed that Carlo saw himself as a professional killer who could escape justice after killing 3 young people. This mindset persisted until the next trial, but just before that date in late July 2016, Carlo admitted his guilt and revealed many details about the crime. He admitted to using air freshener to cover up the smell of decomposing corpses in the trunk of his car. He even tried to sell the car a few weeks after the murders. However, after 3 weeks, the smell became too strong to ignore, so he abandoned the car outside the city. Carlo Mercado was eventually sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. During the trial, Carlo showed no remorse. He remained calm, appearing indifferent to the proceedings. Carlo did not seek forgiveness from the victims' families. Surprisingly, he chose to waive his right to appeal, seemingly as a way of admitting his guilt for the murder of innocent young people. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Brittany Gregory. Brittany Gregory was born on April 1, 1988 in Brigg, New Jersey, a small town. She is the youngest of 5 children, and her parents are divorced. She and her siblings live with their father. Brittany has a strong relationship with everyone, especially her sister Brianna, who is 4 years older than her. They have a special bond, often helping each other, exchanging clothes, and playing together. Brittany did very well in school. She was recognized as the top student in her class, and her teachers saw great potential in her, believing that she could become a scientist in the future. Despite her achievements, Brittany remained humble, cheerful, and kind. She often helped others and had many friends. Brittany harbored a unique desire to become a forensic scientist, motivated by her fascination with analyzing evidence at crime scenes. By the summer of 2004, 16-year-old Brittany and her 20-year-old older sister, Brianna, lived with their father, Joe Dana, and his new partner, Lori Peterson, in a small house near their school. Their home was the last house on the street, adjacent to a wooded area. At that time, Brittany was dating an 18-year-old named John Fitzgerald. They had been in a relationship for nearly 2 years, and John was well-liked by Brittany's family. On Sunday, July 11, 2004, Brianna and her mother traveled to Toms River to visit Brittany's brother, who needed help caring for his daughter. While they were gone, Brittany called her mother on her cell phone. Voice was very sad, as if something was wrong. Her mother explained that they were too far from home to take Brittany to John's house right away, but that Brianna could come and help her in an hour. Brittany disagreed with this plan. Brianna was free about 45 minutes later and tried calling Brittany, but younger sister did not answer. Thinking that Brittany might be asleep or had found another way to get a ride, Brianna decided to go to bed. The next morning, Brianna came home to find that Brittany was missing. Although Brittany's belongings, including her phone, were still in her room, Brianna wondered if she had stayed overnight at John's place. However, it didn't make sense for her to leave without telling anyone, especially without her phone. Worried, Brianna began calling all of Brittany's friends to see if they had seen her, but no one had any information. Brianna then called John, who said that he last spoke to Brittany on Sunday morning and that she had not visited him since. Realizing that something was wrong, Brianna rushed to the police station to report Brittany missing. The police initially dismissed Brianna's concerns about younger sister, Brittany. They thought Brittany might have run away or was just hanging out with friends. Brianna told the police that she had already reached out to all of Brittany's friends and her boyfriend, but no one had seen her. She stressed that her sister wouldn't have run away because she was a dedicated student who preferred spending time in the library. After some convincing from Brianna, the police began to take the situation more seriously, and police started their investigation. Their first visit was to the father's house, where Brittany had last been seen, to look for clues. They found Brittany's purse, phone, and wallet still in her room, and everything seemed normal, no signs of struggle. Police also interviewed all family members living in the home and confirmed that each had an alibi. Posters featuring pictures of the Brittany were placed throughout the city as police began searching the area around her house and interviewing neighbors for information. They found that her house was at the end of the street, adjacent to a wooded area. Although none of the neighbors reported anything unusual that evening, one neighbor remembered seeing a girl resembling Brittany walking down the street late Friday night, 2 days before she went missing. Brianna told the police that Brittany and John had been having a difficult relationship, often arguing, and that they had another fight on the day she disappeared. Police brought John in for questioning, where he confidently claimed that the last time he spoke to Brittany was that morning before she went missing. John was at the beach with friends, and he was not enjoying himself. He mentioned that he had broken up with Brittany a few days earlier, but she was having trouble accepting it, even though she knew he was now dating someone else. John did not plan to see Brittany that evening and was unaware that she was coming to meet him. However, he shared an important detail: Brittany often took a path through the forest behind her father's house to visit him. When asked why he broke up with Brittany, John explained that she had kissed another guy at a party, which led him to end their relationship and start dating someone new. The last time he saw Brittany was on July 10th, the day before she disappeared. On that day, she gave him a letter in which she expressed a desire to reconcile. The police requested to see this letter, and John provided it to them. In the letter, Brittany apologized for her actions, acknowledged that she had hurt John, and asked if they could remain friends. John appeared genuinely worried and anxious about Brittany's disappearance. The police had no evidence against him and released him after he passed a background check and a polygraph test, Thereby, he was eliminated from the suspect list. Brittany's disappearance became increasingly puzzling. Contrary to her family's beliefs, she was not as shy as they thought. She attended parties, flirted with various guys, and would sometimes travel through the forest in the evenings to meet a guy who lived about 1.5 kilometers away. This raised concerns about what could have happened to her in the forest. Search efforts began there, focusing on a bike path that started near her house and led to the John's place. Despite searching for 3 days, no signs of her were found. The investigation hit a wall until a woman came forward. She had been in the park with her boyfriend that evening and remembered one vehicle avalanche pickup with distinctive wheels. That passed by. She noted the license plate, and police traced the vehicle to a 23-year-old man named Anthony Geiger. When they investigated Anthony, they discovered that he was the ex-boyfriend of Brittany's older sister Bobby. They had ended their relationship a month earlier because he was jealous and made suspiciously friendly gestures toward Brittany. Brittany's friends noticed that at parties, Anthony often looked at her in a strange way and attempted to flirt with her. The last time they all gathered was for dinner, where Anthony flirted with Brittany again. This behavior raised suspicions, who thought he might have tracked down and kidnapped her. They brought him in for questioning. Anthony denied being near the woods on the evening of July 11th, but he admitted that he had a friendship with Brittany and had seen her frequently at parties and other gatherings. However, he denied his friend's claims that he had flirted with her, saying that Brittany was too nice for him and that he only saw her as a friend. He insisted that he had an alibi, saying that he had spent that evening at home with a new girlfriend. The girlfriend was contacted by police and she confirmed Anthony's alibi. With no substantial evidence against him, the police released Anthony. Police reviewed Brittany's letter to John and discovered disturbing notes in her breakup text messages. They began to worry that she might harm herself because of her breakup with her boyfriend. Brittany's parents, upon hearing this theory, firmly rejected the idea that their intelligent, ambitious daughter would take her end one's own life. They believed that she loved life too much and had made important plans for her future that a breakup would not derail. The investigation hit another dead end, prompting police to reach out to the public through the media in the hope of finding potential witnesses. Police from surrounding areas joined the effort and began searching the house where Brittany went missing. Brittany's parents decided it was time to take action to find their daughter. They began by visiting nearby homes and asking locals for information, but their efforts yielded no results. During a thorough search, the police discovered something interesting in the house, a letter hidden in a magazine. In the letter, Brittany expressed her desire to enter a competition. She revealed that she came from a troubled family. Her mother was a drug addict who abandoned her when she was 9 years old. She now lived with her father and his partner, and their relationship was strained. In addition, her brother was in prison, and she visited him every weekend. She mentioned that she wasn't perfect, but she had a kind heart and wanted to be different from her parents. She was determined to create a better life for herself and dreamed of becoming a criminologist to help solve crimes. After the police read her letter, they identified new suspects, the Brittany family, who had not been considered before. The police started investigating all the members of the Brittany family, discovering that in the house where there was a massage parlor for men. The massage parlor is run by Lauren Peterson, Brittany's father's second wife. The house received daily visits from various men for private meetings, and the woman regularly saw clients. It appeared that the entire neighborhood was aware of this, and Lauren openly embraced her profession, handing out business cards widely. Neighbors reported witnessing illegal substances at her residence, raising suspicions that Lauren might also be involved in drug distribution. Police realized the teenager's disappearance was not coincidental. Something serious had occurred, indicating she was in danger. It was possible that one of Lauren's clients could have abducted Brittany from the house. The police began checking Lauren's clients and discovered many unusual people among them. Soon, the news reported that the police had arrested a suspect in Brittany's murder. The mother of the Brittany recognized him as 38-year-old Jack Fuller, who had been a family friend for 20 years. He attended all their family vacations and kept in close contact with them. His daughter was engaged to Brittany's brother, who was in prison. Brittany's mother was shocked when she heard the news. They couldn't believe that Jack could be involved. He was friendly and his teenage children were friends with Brittany. Brittany had saved Jack's life a few months before she went missing. When she went to visit his daughter, she found Jack not breathing. Brittany called 911 and the responders were able to revive him after he overdosed. How could he hurt the person who saved him? The parents knew that Jack was involved in drug use and distribution. Jack had 48 previous convictions for drug possession and trafficking. His most recent sentence was 5.5 years in prison, and he had been on parole during the time Brittany went missing. They speculated that he may have stolen money to buy drugs, but questioned why he would target their daughter. They thought he may have taken her ring or necklace. Police then tracked him down. They received information about Jack from a caller who said that Jack had complained of back pain because he had buried the body of the girl he had killed in sandy soil. Jack reportedly told the caller at the burial site would not be discovered and asked for advice on how deep to bury the body to prevent animals from finding it. The police invited the informant to the station to meet with Jack and record a conversation about the murder. The informant agreed and met Jack, successfully recording him saying he buried the body deep in the wilderness, making it unlikely to be found. Jack confessed to killing Brittany because she recognized him but did not provide further details. He also mentioned that he needed to eliminate someone else who knew too much, referring to his childhood friend Tommy, who was waiting in a car. However, at the end of their conversation, Jack claimed he was joking before getting into the car and leaving with Tommy. The police arrived at Tommy's house and took him to the station for questioning. Although Tommy insisted he didn't know anything, they showed him a recording of Jack expressing his desire to kill his friend. This made Tommy realize he was in danger and that it was wiser to report Jack. He then revealed everything he knew. On the night Brittany went missing, Tommy and Jack were driving around the neighborhood while smoking marijuana. They were near Brittany's house, and Jack decided to visit her father. He approached the house and found the door unlocked. Upon entering, he realized that Brittany's father was not home. 5 minutes later, Jack returned to the car with Brittany. When Tommy asked what happened, Brittany looked down and did not answer. Jack told Tommy that Jack would drive him home. After dropping his friend off, Jack left with Brittany. The next day, Tommy met Jack but did not mention the events of the previous day. They stopped at a car wash, where Jack meticulously washed his car, inside and out, even though he had never done this before. The car wash attendant jokingly asked him why he washed his car so thoroughly, which angered Jack, causing him to tell them to mind their own business or they might regret it. The attendant quickly backed off. Tommy learns of Brittany's disappearance, confronts Jack, and asks, "What did you do with that girl?" Jack is angry and insists that he knows nothing, claiming that he just took her home and left. Tommy suspects that Jack took Brittany into the woods that night with the intention of causing harm, especially since Jack had planned to use Lori's services that night, but Lori was not home. The police identify Jack as the prime suspect. When they come to arrest him, he tries to burn his car. The police suspect that evidence may be found in the car and conduct a thorough search. Brittany's blood was found in Jack's car. Police later went to the car wash and found that Jack had used a vacuum cleaner to clean the inside of the car. Police collected the vacuum cleaner bag for testing and found a large amount of sand and blood. Testing confirmed that the blood was Brittany's. Despite this evidence, Jack did not admit to kidnapping or killing Brittany and refused to discuss the matter. Police interviewed Jack's friends and acquaintances, most of whom believed he was capable of murder. Many described him as someone who would do anything to get what he wanted. Jack never held a job but always had money. He was involved in drug trafficking and forced drug addicts to provide sexual services in exchange for drugs. After Brittany went missing, a patrol officer stopped Jack when he saw Jack's car parked in a remote area near the woods outside the city. The officer asked Jack why he was there, and he said he was looking for his lost dog. The search for Brittany's body focused on the location, involving police, helicopters, and volunteers, but they found nothing. Police believe Brittany asked Jack to drive her to her boyfriend's house, but unfortunately, he took advantage of the situation and attacked and killed Brittany. A woman later contacted the police, saying she had information about where Brittany's body could be found. The woman had been held captive by Jack for several months while she struggled with drug addiction and was forced to comply with his demands. During this time, she got to know him well and learned all his secrets, including his routines and the places he frequented. He often took her along to these locations. One day, he pointed out a spot and mentioned it would be a good place to bury a body since no one would discover it there. Initially, the police were skeptical of her claims and asked her for more details. She was able to specify the location and noted that the soil there was sandy. Police recalled, an informant had previously mentioned Jack's complaints about the challenges of burying a body in sandy soil. The woman's information was credible, prompting them to investigate the area she identified. The search area was large, and several days passed without any results. Then, specialists compared sand collected from a vacuum cleaner with the local soil and found an exact match, prompting them to continue the search. On July 27, 2004, the dogs led them to an area with much less vegetation, where they suspected a body might be buried. They used a long stick to probe the ground, and when they pulled it out, it carried the smell of decomposing flesh. The body in the pit was that of a young girl. She was wearing a necklace with the name Brittany on it. The medical examiner confirmed that the body belonged to Brittany Gregory. Could not determine the exact cause of death due to the condition of the body, which showed signs of strangulation and severe head trauma from a blunt object. While there were no clear signs of sexual assault, it could not be completely ruled out. Jack consulted with a lawyer and chose to negotiate a plea bargain with the prosecution to reduce his sentence. The family agreed to this arrangement to avoid a lengthy trial. Brittany's mother expressed that she did not want the death penalty for Jack, believing it would be too easy for him. Instead, she wished for him to serve a life sentence in prison, enduring the consequences of his actions. Jack mentioned that Brittany asked him for a ride to see her boyfriend, and he agreed. He took his friend Tommy along and left with Brittany. However, they stopped, and Jack began smoking weed in front of her, which angered Brittany. She yelled at him and hit his hands. In response, Jack became violent and punched Brittany in the face, only stopping when she stopped moving. Realizing she was dead, he buried her, but no one believed his account of what happened. The forensic report revealed that Brittany had been strangled and suffered a severe head injury. The prosecution argued that the crime was sexually motivated. Ultimately, Jack was convicted and received a 30-year prison sentence without the possibility of parole. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Tyale Palmer. Tyale Palmer was a 12-year-old girl with her whole future ahead of her. She was an ordinary teenager, but her life ended tragically. She became a victim of terrible violence. Her mother took her to the Child Protection Center, fearing for her life because of her abusive father. The mother believed this decision would safeguard her daughter and provide her with a better future. The mother genuinely believed she was making the right decision. Her mother herself is also suffering from domestic violence. She did not want her daughter to experience the same. She was unable to raise Tyale properly due to the family's difficult circumstances. Tyale became a troubled child, little girl frequently running away from home to escape the conflicts between her parents and often resorting to vagrancy. In January 2015, Tyale, a 12-year-old girl, was placed by the Child Protection Center with a new family in an area outside Chambers Flat, about 40 minutes from Brisbane, Australia. This is a quiet, cozy place with a population of about 2,500 people. Her adoptive family was the Thorburns, consisting of Rick, his wife Julene, and their sons. The eldest son, Joshua, was 19, and the youngest, Trent, was 18. Previously, Tyale had been adopted by several families, but because she had a complex personality, not all adoptive parents were able to care for her. Some considered her quite contentious. The Thorburns were no different. Tyale was unhappy about living with two teenage boys much older than her, Trent and Joshua, but she had no choice. At that time, her adoptive parents, Rick and Julene, had been married for over 25 years. Rick, a former truck driver, had to switch to lighter transport jobs due to a serious back injury. He started a fast food business from a van and also owned a horse farm. Julene ran a home daycare. The family was regarded as very decent and exemplary in the area, which is why Child Protection Services chose them for Tyale. Within 4 months, Tyale appeared to have settled into her new family and continued living with them until the unfortunate incident that followed. She attended Marsden State High School, just a 20-minute drive from home. Her life seemed to be improving. It seemed that everyone in the Thorburn family have gotten used to her and they got along very well. However, not everything was as perfect as it seemed. October 30th, 2015 started out like any other normal day for the Thorburn family. Rick took his adopted daughter Tyale to school and then returned home to work. A few hours later, he received a call from the school informing him that Tyale hadn't attended class. This wasn't the first time she had run away. She had a difficult childhood and was used to avoiding her problems in this way. However, this time they could not find her. Unlike previous instances where she usually returned on her own or was found. Then, Rick made a post on social media explaining the situation and asking anyone who knew Tyale's whereabouts to contact him. But no one responded. The Thorburn family knew Tyale was excited about Halloween and had already prepared a costume, so it was unusual when she disappeared just before the holiday. Concerned, they contacted the police, and the teenager was reported missing. However, no one tried to find the little girl, because it was assumed that she would return on her own. Less than a week later, on the morning of November 5, 2015, a local fisherman made a distressing call to the police. He had discovered a body in the reeds in the shallow waters of the Pimpama River, about 30 kilometers south of where the girl was last seen. By this time, the body was badly decomposed, likely due to local wildlife and the typical climate of the area. The police officers at the scene were unable to determine the sex or identity of the body, but they believed it was a teenager. The body was severely damaged, wearing only underwear, and was sent for autopsy. Following forensic examination and comparison with missing persons in the area, the police suspected it was 12-year-old Tyale, who had gone missing a week prior. This was later confirmed through DNA analysis. Experts concluded that the initial suspected animal bites were actually inflicted by a person, shows that Tyale suffered brutal abuse. The case was reclassified as murder and an investigation began. As Rick was the last person to see her alive, so law enforcement focused on investigating him. His behavior and inconsistent testimony raised suspicions, but required thorough investigation and evidence to prove. Investigators decided to interview the rest of the Thorburn family to see if they had any more information. However, after questioning the family members, they were unable to gather any useful information. Everyone corroborated Rick's account that he had dropped Tyale off at school, but no one had seen her since. The investigators then visited the school to verify Thorburn family's story, and there, they were able to collect more valuable information. After interviewing over 100 people, including all the students in Tyalea's class and her teachers, it became clear that no one had seen her that day. She was not seen in class or anywhere near the school. A review of the school's surveillance footage from that day revealed that she did not come to school and was not seen at the entrance, which was unexpected. This raised the question, where had she gone? However, some students, including Tyalea's friends, came forward to report that she was dealing with major problems. One of her friends even told the family that Tyale had pleaded to be taken out of the Thorburn family home because she felt mistreated and was worried about getting into grave danger. Sadly, Tyalea's life ended in a horrific manner. After speaking with other students, the police determined that Tyale had no enemies and there was no one else who could have harmed her. As a result, suspicions about the foster family, the Thorburns, grew. However, when questioned, the family members strongly denied any allegations of domestic violence, they claiming that Tyale is a person who is very fond of making up stories and in the past she often ran away from foster families. The police then checked this information and found evidence that Tyale usually run away from home. This led them to believe that she was a troubled teenager prone to fabricating stories. All those close to the Thorburn family, including neighbors, confirmed that they were an exemplary family who ran a private kindergarten where many people sent their children. And no one believed that such kind people could do something terrible to their adopted daughter. As a result, the police began searching for other clues to Tyalea's murder, they believing that she may have fabricated a story about being mistreated, just as she had done before. Then the girl ran away and unfortunately became a victim of an attack. As a result, the police had no reason to suspect the Thorburns and instead, they focused their investigation on finding another motive for the murder. The Thorburn family continued to operate their kindergarten at home while the investigation was ongoing. Detectives have questioned about 300 sex offenders in the area. They hope to find clues to Tyalea's murder. However, even this extensive inquiry failed to yield any clues. Most of they had alibis, and some no longer lived in the area, making it impossible to identify suspects from this list. On December 4, 2015, a vital piece of evidence was found near the site where the body was discovered. Tyalea's shoes and backpack, which she used for school, were recovered about 100 meters away. This case drew widespread public attention. The story was extensively covered on various Australian TV channels, so gradually the whole country knew about this case. Several rallies were held before the funeral, with people demanding justice for the girl's tragic and undeserved death. Tyalea's biological mother organized the rallies and publicly sought answers from the police about her daughter's death. She also appeared on television to raise awareness and express her outrage over the failure of Child Protective Services to safeguard her daughter. The public's response was overwhelming, with over 600 people attending the girl's funeral on November 14, despite many not knowing her personally. Mourners wore white and purple t-shirts with hearts and Tyalea's name, as purple was her favorite color. The coffin was adorned with about 400 white roses, and purple balloons were released into the sky as the hearse departed for a private cremation. It's been 5 months since Taylor's murder, but police still have no new leads. A substantial reward of 250,000 Australian dollars, equivalent to approximately 160,000 US dollars, was offered for any information that could aid in the case. Tyalea's mother made a heartfelt appeal on television, pleading for eyewitnesses to come forward and for those responsible to confess. The police also guaranteed immunity from prosecution for any accomplice who did not directly commit the crime and was the first to provide information. Despite these efforts, no new leads were uncovered. Police received a number of calls from a number of individuals, but none provided any valuable information. As the summer of 2016 arrived, the police have yet to find the main suspect. Detectives interviewed numerous individuals with a history of sexual violence, but the advanced decomposition of Tyalea's body at the time of discovery had destroyed any forensic evidence, leaving investigators uncertain about the cause of death. The only lead in the case was a hyoid bone fracture, suggesting that Tyalea was strangled. Initially, police suspected that the abduction occurred near the school, where the girl was dropped off by her parents in an area not covered by CCTV cameras. This theory was based on the lack of surveillance footage. A reward of $250,000 was offered for information leading to the capture of the perpetrator, but it remained unclaimed. A breakthrough came in May 2016, when the State Police Department received an anonymous tip after 6 months of investigation. The caller claimed to have information about the girl, Tyalea, and her foster family, Thorburn family. According to the anonymous witness, Thorburn family had been seeking a child with behavioral issues to care for, which would entitle them to increased benefits. The family's interest in Tyalea was allegedly purely financial, and they don't have any other feelings for little girl. The informant also suggested that all members of the Thorburn family might have been involved in Tyalea's disappearance. Unfortunately, the caller ended the conversation without providing further details, and their identity remains unknown. In connection with the phone call, the police revisited the possibility that Thorburn family was involved in the murder. Initially, they received reports from Tyalea's classmates of domestic violence at the Thorburn home, but these claims were unverified. However, after the anonymous call, detectives decided to re-question Thorburn family some of Tyalea's classmates. One of Tyalea's friends revealed that she had a romantic relationship with 19-year-old Trent, the youngest son of Thorburn family. Due to her age, Taylor didn't fully understand the situation and believed they were in a genuine relationship, as Trent had led her to believe. She developed feelings for him and enjoyed the horses on the farm, but she was also intimidated by Trent and the rest of the family, so she wanted to run away from them. It is likely that Tyalea suffered not only sexual violence but also physical abuse within the Thorburn household. Although Tyalea's friend's testimony needs further investigation, repeated questioning of the Thorburn family members yielded no results. They continued to deny all allegations, particularly those related to the abuse of a minor. Nevertheless, due to the serious suspicions surrounding the family, the authorities revoked their permission to operate a kindergarten and suspended their foster care license. Law enforcement officers installed listening devices in the Thorburn family's home. They uncovering shocking information that tarnished the family's decent image. The family members were extremely supportive of each other. Through the listening devices, it was discovered that on October 29, 2015, the family held a meeting, just a day before Tyalea went missing. During this meeting, Trent informed his parents that Tyalea had been having unusual stomach pains. This makes them worried and suspicious about Tyalea, a 12-year-old girl, having an unwanted pregnancy. The Thorburn family had become aware of the intimate relationship between Trent and Tyalea shortly before her disappearance. It was revealed that he had been having intercourse with the girl when no one was home. The wiretapping also exposed that Trent had repeatedly had intercourse with she over a period of about 10 months, nearly the entire time the girl was in their care. When they suspected Tyalea was pregnant, Trent turned to his parents, worried that their relationship would be exposed. However, Rick reassured his son that he would handle the problem. Judging by the conversations among the Thorburn family members, Tyalea was terrified of her father, Rick. Her fear was not unfounded, as the rest of the family also seemed to fear Rick's. Despite appearing to be a decent family man, but he was hiding a cruel and sinister personality. One evening, after a family discussion, Rick forced all the family members, except Tyalea, to leave the house. When they returned a couple of hours later, Tyale was missing. Rick claimed she had run away and that the problems with her were now solved. However, his confidence that she would keep quiet made the rest of his family suspicious that he might have harmed or even killed her. When Trent tried to check her room, Rick forbade it and made a threatening gesture. The family was too intimidated to contradict Rick, and they eventually dropped the matter. It later became clear that Rick's story about dropping off Tyale at school was false. In reality, she was likely no longer alive by that time. However, what exactly happened to her remained a mystery. Detectives monitoring the family's conversations overheard Rick instructing others on what to say and do to avoid arousing police suspicion, and they obediently followed his instructions. Initially, police called Julian and their children, Trent and Joshua, in for questioning, believing they would be the easiest to get information from. As the police disclosed the information they had, family members began to give testimony. The detectives gradually pieced together what had happened at their house. Rick had set everything up as though he was protecting his family. However, after thoroughly reviewing footage from the school's external CCTV cameras, the police realized that Rick had carefully attempted to conceal his crime and mislead the detectives. For example, he had indeed driven towards the school, as his car appeared on several CCTV cameras. However, none of the footage showed Tyale getting out of the car. Afterwards, a storm of criticism and suspicion fell on the Thorburn family. Julian and Joshua charged with giving false testimony and trying to mislead the investigation. Trent, involved in violence, faced charges of first-degree murder and was similarly accused of attempting to confuse the investigation. Detectives believed he killed Tyale and tampered with her body to hinder forensic identification. This initially made determining her gender difficult. Fortunately, DNA testing made identification possible, revealing Trent likely hadn't considered this method existed. Law enforcement officers had strong reasons to suspect that Rick was involved in severe physical and sexual abuse of Tyale. A total of 9 charges were filed against him. Trent faced charges of incest and giving false testimony. The family car, sold soon after Tyale's disappearance, was seized and inspected. Blood stains were found, which worsened Rick's health. He fainted when detained, and his condition became so severe in custody that doctors had to place him in an artificial coma. After a few days in the hospital, Rick regained consciousness. Doctors believed he might have intentionally caused his condition by taking medication. However, Rick could not evade responsibility for his crimes, and the Thorburn family was brought to court one after another. During the trial, Julian and Joshua admitted their guilt for all charges and agreed to testify against Trent and Rick. The jury quickly concluded that the entire Thorburn family was guilty of monstrous acts, though each member was guilty on different counts. Joshua was sentenced to 3 months in prison. His mother, Julian, received a sentence of 1.5 years. Trent, who pleaded guilty to perjury, incest, and attempted obstruction of justice, was sentenced to 4 years. All of them, including Trent, who raped Tyale, are now free. Trent was released on January 19, 2018, after serving only 16 months. The most brutal figure in this case, Rick, confessed during the trial to Tyale's murder, hiding her body to protect his son and family's reputation. He received a life sentence in May 2018, with eligibility for parole after 20 years.